Story 1. Fiance dumped me, but shocked I threw her out of my house and took back the ring. So, where do I even start with this? My ex-fiance Laura dumped me out of nowhere, and honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell happened. I thought everything was good between us, like, yeah, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't, right? We'd been together for 4 years, we were planning to get married, and then boom, well, not that word, but you get me. She tells me we need to break up. And her reason? My job. Yeah, you read that right. My damn job at my family's restaurant. Now I get it. My hours are kind of weird. I work evenings, and by the time I'm home, she's already been off work for like 3 or 4 hours. But this isn't news. She's known this since day one. Like before we even got engaged, she knew my schedule was all over the place. I work late shifts. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. I'm there from 4:30 to 9 p.m., Fridays and Saturdays a little later. But it's not like I'm never around. We had Sundays, some mornings, and even most of Saturdays before my shift started. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But Laura? Nah, she starts talking about how we barely see each other and that I need to find a new job because she's tired of waiting around for me to get home every night. She works 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., so she gets off way earlier than me, and I guess she didn't like having to fill that time alone. I mean, it sucks, sure, but I always thought we were making it work. I even offered for her to work with me at the restaurant. I thought it was a pretty solid idea. We could spend more time together, she wouldn't be bored waiting around, and we'd save up more money for the wedding. But nope, she shot that down quick. Said she didn't feel comfortable working for my parents. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. I respected that. I didn't push it because I didn't want her to feel awkward or anything, but then she kept bringing up my job. Every few weeks it was like, when are you going to find something better? Or, I just don't see how this is sustainable. It started to get on my nerves because, like, how many times do I have to say I'm happy where I'm at? I love working for my family. The restaurant's been in the family for years, and yeah, the hours are long sometimes, but it's worth it. So one night she just sat me down and was like, Ethan, I can't do this anymore. I thought she was kidding at first, but nope, she was dead serious. She told me that if I wasn't going to change jobs, she couldn't see how we could ever get married. It totally blindsided me. I tried to tell her that we could figure it out, like maybe there's a way to balance things better, but she wasn't having any of it. She said she needed more from me. More time, more effort, more commitment to our future, whatever that means. I told her I was committed. I mean, we were literally planning a wedding, so how much more committed can you get? What really stung is that she said she felt like I didn't care enough about her needs. Like, excuse me? I've been busting my ass working late shifts so we could save up for our future. It's not like I'm out partying or ignoring her. I'm working. For us. I thought that would count for something, but apparently not. Then she dropped the whole maybe we should just be friends thing, and man, that was a gut punch. We weren't even in an argument. There was no yelling, no big fight. It was just her, sitting there calmly, like she'd been rehearsing this conversation in her head for weeks. I asked her straight up, are you serious? You want to throw all this away because of my job? And she had the nerve to say, it's not just your job, it's the fact that you don't seem willing to change for us. That's when I got pissed. I reminded her that she knew about my schedule before we even got engaged. If it was such a problem for her, why the hell did she agree to marry me in the first place? She got all defensive and said that she thought, over time, I'd grow out of it and find something else. Like, what? Since when is working hard at a family business something you need to grow out of? I'm not gonna lie, I felt betrayed. She basically admitted that she was waiting for me to become some different version of myself, and when that didn't happen, she was out. After that conversation, I just avoided her. I couldn't even look at her. I stayed late at work every night because the last thing I wanted to do was come home and sit in the same house with someone who didn't want to be with me anymore. But here's the thing. She didn't leave. Like, I thought after you break up with someone, especially when you're engaged, you'd start looking for somewhere else to stay, right? Nope. She kept acting like nothing had changed, like we were just roommates now or something. Every time I came home, she was there, chilling on the couch, watching TV like everything was fine. It made me feel sick, honestly. How could she break up with me and still live under my roof like nothing happened? So one night, I finally told her, Laura, you need to move out. We're not together anymore, and this isn't working for me. And get this. She looked at me like I had two heads. She was like, are you serious? You're kicking me out? I told her, yeah, I am. We're not getting married anymore, so what's the point of living together? She tried to guilt trip me, saying she had nowhere to go and that I was being heartless for making her leave. At that point, I was just done. I told her she could stay with her parents until she figured things out. And then, to top it all off, I asked for the ring back. You'd think I just slapped her or something. She freaked out, saying I gave it to her and that I couldn't just ask for it back. I told her straight up, that ring was for our wedding, and since we're not getting married, I want it back. She called me greedy, said I could afford another one if I really loved her, and that I was being an asshole for trying to kick her out after all we've been through. At that point, I couldn't even argue anymore. I just wanted her gone. So after I told Laura she needed to move out, things got real awkward real fast. I mean, you'd think she would have just packed her bags and left, right? But nope, she stuck around like she was waiting for something. At first, I thought she was just dragging her feet, trying to figure out where to go. I mean, it's not like she didn't have options. Her parents live nearby and she's got friends she could crash with. But instead, she just stayed. And I gotta tell you, those few days after the breakup were the most uncomfortable days of my life. We were living like strangers in the same house. She'd sit on one side of the room, I'd be on the other, and it was just this weird silence. No one wanted to be the first to talk. I'd get home from work and she'd already be there, watching TV or doing her thing. But it felt like this giant elephant was sitting between us, and neither of us wanted to deal with it. But then it got worse. One day, I come home and Laura is sitting at the kitchen table with my mom. Yeah, you read that right. My mom. Apparently, she had called my mom over without even telling me. So I walk in, and they're sitting there having coffee like everything's totally normal. I was so confused. My mom looks at me and goes, "Ethan, we need to talk." I was already annoyed at that point, but I tried to keep calm. I mean, it's my mom, right? I sit down and Laura starts telling her side of the story, saying she doesn't have anywhere to go, and how it's unfair that I'm asking her to move out so soon after the breakup. And then my mom, bless her heart, starts suggesting that maybe we should work something out and that Laura could stay for a bit longer while she figures things out. I couldn't believe it. Like what? I just stared at them for a second before saying, "Mom, we're not together anymore. Why would I let her stay here?" My mom, always the peacekeeper, goes, "Well, she needs time to figure things out. It's not easy to just up and move, you know." I tried to stay calm, but I was fuming inside. I mean, yeah, it's not easy, but we broke up. We're not a couple anymore, so why should I have to put up with this? I looked at Laura and said, "You've had time. It's been almost a week. You need to leave." And then, of course, Laura gets all emotional, saying she thought I was better than this, that she never expected me to just toss her out like trash. She even starts tearing up in front of my mom, and I swear, it was like she was trying to make me look like the bad guy. My mom, at this point, starts trying to smooth things over, saying, "Ethan, maybe you could give her a little more time. You two were together for so long. It's not easy to just end things like this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mom was taking Laura's side. I love my mom, but this was not her call to make. I told her straight up, "Mom, this isn't your business. Laura and I are done. She needs to go." And that's when Laura pulls the ultimate guilt trip. She looks me dead in the eyes and says, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't be doing this. I thought you cared about me." Man, that hit me hard. I didn't want to be the bad guy here, but at the same time, how long was I supposed to let this drag on? She's the one who ended things, not me. And now she's trying to flip it like I'm the one being unreasonable. I stood my ground, though. I told her, "I do care, but we're not together anymore, and this isn't your home. You need to move on." Laura stormed out of the room, and my mom just sat there looking all disappointed, like I was the one who messed everything up. She gave me this look and said, "I just hope you're doing the right thing." That messed with me for a while. Like, was I being too harsh? Should I have given her more time? But then I thought about how she'd been dragging this out, trying to stay in the house, making me feel uncomfortable in my own place. And I knew I wasn't in the wrong. This was my house, my space, and she was just trying to manipulate the situation to make herself the victim. The next day I come home and Laura is gone. Her stuff's still there, but she's not home. At first, I felt this huge relief, thinking maybe she finally decided to move out. But nope, it was just another game. She comes back late that night, acting all nonchalant like nothing happened. She didn't say a word to me, just went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. At this point, I was done. I couldn't deal with this anymore. I texted her, telling her she had until the end of the week to get her stuff out and leave, or I was going to start the eviction process. I know it sounds harsh, but what else was I supposed to do? She wasn't taking me seriously, and I wasn't about to spend another week living in this weird, messed up situation. And get this. She texts back, "I can't believe you're being like this. I thought we could at least be friends, but you're treating me like I'm some stranger." That's when I realized she wasn't ever going to leave unless I forced her to. She was playing this whole thing like a game, trying to get me to cave, maybe hoping I'd apologize or something and beg her to stay, but I wasn't about to do that, not after everything she'd put me through. By the end of the week, Laura finally started packing her stuff. It was like this big dramatic scene every time she moved a box. She'd huff and puff, making a show of it like she wanted me to feel sorry for her. But I didn't. I mean, I felt bad that things ended the way they did, but I wasn't about to let her stay just because she didn't feel like moving. And then came the ring. The damn ring. I thought we were done with that conversation, but nope. She tries to pull it again, saying, I can't believe you're actually asking for the ring back. You know I cared about you? I didn't even argue this time. I just told her, we're not getting married. The ring was for the wedding. No wedding, no ring. She gave me this look, like I was the biggest jerk on the planet, but she finally gave it back. And honestly, when she handed it over, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. It was like the final chapter of our relationship was closing, and I could finally move on. Now, it's been a few days since she left, and honestly, I feel better than I have in months. It's weird not having her around, but it's also kind of freeing. I don't have to walk on eggshells in my own house, and I don't have to deal with her trying to guilt trip me every 5 seconds. Do I miss her? Yeah, a little, but not enough to go back to that mess. Sometimes things just need to end, and dragging them out only makes it worse. Update 1. So after Laura finally moved out, I thought things would settle down, right? Like, we're done, she's gone, I can finally get back to normal. But man, I was wrong. Things got weird real fast. First of all, I didn't even realize how much stuff she had left behind. It was like every room in the house had some random item of hers. I'm talking about clothes, books, even her toothbrush was still in the bathroom. I wasn't going to touch it at first, but then a couple of days went by, and I was like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. So I started packing up her things and putting them in boxes. Figured I'd drop them off at her parents' house or something, be done with it. But then, while I was going through her stuff, I found something that threw me off. I don't even know how to explain it, but I found this notebook she had hidden in one of her drawers. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who snoops through people's stuff, but I mean, she left it here, right? So I opened it, and it was like this whole diary of complaints about me and our relationship. Stuff like, Ethan never listens to me. He doesn't care about my feelings. Why can't he just get a normal job like other guys? It was like reading a list of everything she hated about me, and I gotta be honest, it messed with my head. I know relationships aren't perfect, but seeing all of that written out, page after page, was rough. I had no idea she felt that way. I thought we had our issues, but I didn't think it was that bad. And the worst part? She wrote about how she'd been thinking about breaking up with me for months, but was just waiting for the right time. Like, what does that even mean? The right time to end someone's life plans? I couldn't believe she was sticking around, pretending everything was fine, when in reality, she was already halfway out the door. So after reading all that, I just felt this weird combination of anger and sadness. Like I knew the relationship was over, but finding that notebook made it so much more real. It wasn't just a breakup because of work schedules. It was like she had been mentally checked out for a long time, and I didn't even see it. I sat there for a while just staring at the pages, trying to figure out if I missed something or if I'd been completely blind this whole time. And then it hit me. She never really wanted to marry me. She just wanted me to be someone I wasn't. She wanted me to quit my job, change my life, and become this ideal version of myself that didn't exist. No wonder she broke up with me. I could never live up to what she wanted. I put the notebook away and tried to distract myself, but it kept eating at me. I couldn't stop thinking about everything she wrote. It was like this nagging voice in the back of my head, reminding me that maybe I wasn't good enough. That's the thing about breakups. They make you question everything. You start overanalyzing every conversation, every argument, every time you said, I love you, and wonder if any of it meant what you thought it did. A few days later, Laura texts me. I hadn't heard from her since she moved out, and honestly, I wasn't expecting to. But her text wasn't what I thought it'd be. She didn't want to check in or talk about the breakup. Nope. She wanted to come by and pick up a few things. Like, okay, you've already been gone for over a week, and now you want to come back and get your stuff? I agreed, but I told her to give me a heads up before she came over. I didn't want any surprises. The last thing I needed was to walk in and find her there without warning. So she comes over, and it's as awkward as you'd imagine. She barely looked at me when she walked in, just went straight to grabbing her stuff like she couldn't wait to get out of there. I was standing in the living room, trying to act normal, but the whole situation felt so off. Like we'd shared this life together, we'd been planning a wedding, and now it was like she was just a stranger coming to collect her things. But then something weird happened. As she was grabbing her stuff, she stopped and looked at me. For the first time in days, we actually made eye contact, and she just stood there. like she wanted to say something but couldn't get the words out. I don't know why, but I felt like I had to say something. So I asked, "Is everything okay?" And then she said something I'll never forget. She goes, "I didn't want it to end like this." I didn't know how to respond. What was I supposed to say? We're already here. It's already over. I just stood there, not knowing what to say. And she looked at me like she was waiting for me to fix everything. But I couldn't. How was I supposed to fix something that had been broken for months, maybe even years, and I didn't even realize it? She grabbed the last of her stuff and left without saying another word. The door closed, and just like that, she was gone again. It was this weird mix of relief and sadness. Like I was glad the whole mess was finally over, but at the same time, it felt like this huge chapter of my life had closed, and I wasn't ready for it. After she left, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called up a therapist. I know, sounds dramatic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I missed something huge in our relationship, or maybe I just wasn't cut out for this whole long-term commitment thing. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I figured talking to someone outside of the situation might help. Turns out, talking to someone who doesn't know you or your ex is actually pretty helpful. The therapist didn't give me all the answers or anything, but she made me realize that I wasn't the only one to blame for what happened. Relationships are two-sided, and as much as I messed up in some areas, Laura had her part in it too. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't the villain in this story either. One thing that really stuck with me from those sessions was the idea that sometimes people fall in love with the idea of someone, not who they really are. And looking back, I think that's what Laura did with me. She wanted me to be this version of myself that didn't exist, and when I didn't become that person, she started to check out. So here I am, a couple of months later, feeling better. Not great, but better. I still think about her sometimes, and yeah, I wonder what could have been different. But I also know that if she stayed, things probably would have gotten worse. We weren't right for each other, and that's just the truth. I guess the takeaway is sometimes things end for a reason. It sucks and it hurts, but in the long run, it's better than forcing something that's never going to work. Update 2. So, after Laura left for good, I thought that was it. End of the story, right? Well, turns out, things weren't as done as I thought they were. I didn't realize just how many loose ends there were until I started getting messages from mutual friends. Yeah, it's one of those situations. It started off slow. I'd get a text here and there from people asking me how I was doing, which was fine, but then they'd drop these little comments like, "Laura said she's really struggling," or "Have you heard from her?" At first, I just brushed it off. I figured people were just being polite, trying to feel out where we were at after the breakup. But then the tone of the messages started to change. People were acting like I was the one who kicked her to the curb with no warning. And I'm sitting here like, did Laura not tell people she's the one who broke up with me? Apparently not. Next thing I know, I'm getting these long, guilt-trippy messages from some of her friends, people I barely even know, telling me that I was heartless for making her move out and asking for the ring back. Like, excuse me? She broke up with me. I wasn't about to keep living with my ex-fiancée, pretending everything's fine while she's out there telling people I'm the bad guy. But according to her, I'm the one who didn't care enough to work things out. So now I'm stuck in this weird situation where people are seeing me as the villain of the story and she's playing the victim. It's honestly mind-blowing how fast things can get flipped around. I had to start explaining to people what actually happened, and every time I did, it just felt exhausting. Like, why do I even have to defend myself? A week or two goes by, and I think things are finally dying down. I stopped getting the messages, stopped hearing from people about Laura, and I started to relax. But of course, that didn't last long. One night, I'm sitting at home watching TV, trying to unwind after a long shift at the restaurant, and my phone buzzes. It's a text from Laura's best friend, Jenna. Now, Jenna and I never really got along. She was always the type to get in Laura's ear, telling her what to do, stirring the pot, you know? So when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I knew it wasn't going to be good. I opened the message, and sure enough, it's a novel. Jenna goes on and on about how Laura is devastated, how I broke her heart by not fighting for the relationship, and how I should have tried harder to make things work. She even said something like, "You're supposed to be a team and you just gave up on her." I was so angry I could barely even respond. But I did. I texted her back and I kept it short and simple. I said, "Laura broke up with me. She's the one who wanted out. I'm not going to beg someone to stay when they don't want to." Of course, Jenna didn't leave it at that. She kept texting, trying to guilt trip me, saying how Laura was hurting and needed time, and maybe if I reached out, things could be different. But I wasn't having it. I told her straight up, "We're done. It's over. Let it go. That was the last time I heard from her, for a while anyway. Then, one day, I'm at the restaurant, just trying to get through the dinner rush, when my mom comes over to me with this look on her face. You know that look moms give you when they've got something to say but they're trying to figure out how to say it? Yeah, it was one of those. She pulls me aside and says, "Ethan, I talked to Laura today." I just stared at her like, "Why?" My mom goes, "Well, she called me, said she wanted to apologize for how things ended and just wanted to check in." Now, I don't know about you, but when your ex calls your mom to check in, that's a major red flag. I told my mom, "Look, I don't care if she's sorry or not. We're done. There's no reason for her to be calling you." My mom sighed and said, I know, but she seemed really upset. She said she feels like you hate her now, and she didn't want things to end this way." Here we go again. I had to explain to my mom the whole situation again, how Laura was the one who called it off, how she's been telling people I kicked her out, and how I just want to move on. I could tell my mom felt torn, but she finally got it. She agreed to not get involved anymore, but honestly, it was frustrating that I even had to have that conversation. After that, things started to calm down for real. I didn't hear from Jenna, Laura stopped calling my mom, and I finally started to feel like I could move on. I even started hanging out with my friends again, going out for drinks after work, just trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. But just when I thought everything was finally settling down, something else happened. One night, I was at the bar with a couple of buddies when one of them, Mark, pulls me aside and says, "Hey man, you're not going to like this, but I saw Laura the other day with some guy." Now, I'll be real with you. I wasn't expecting to feel anything when he said that, but for some reason it hit me. Like, I knew we were done, but hearing that she'd moved on already, that was rough. I asked Mark, "Who was he?" And he said he didn't know, but they looked pretty close. That was all I needed to hear. The next few days were weird. I didn't text Laura or anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I wanted her back, but because it felt like this chapter of my life was really truly over now. She was moving on, and I guess that meant I had to as well. Looking back, I realize now that Laura probably checked out long before we even broke up. Maybe that's why it all felt so sudden when it happened. Because for her, it wasn't sudden. She'd been planning it, thinking about it, and by the time she ended it, she was already halfway out the door. It took me a while to accept that. It's hard to admit that someone you cared about stopped caring way before you did. But you know what? In the end, it's for the best. We weren't right for each other, and trying to force it would have just made things worse. Now, I'm focused on myself. I'm not looking for a relationship anytime soon, and I'm definitely not in any rush to jump back into the dating pool. I'm just trying to enjoy the little things again, hanging out with friends, focusing on work, and getting my life back to where I want it to be. And as for Laura, I wish her the best, I really do. But I'm done with the guilt trips, the manipulation, and the drama. I'm moving on. Update 3. So here we are, months later, and I'm finally feeling like I can breathe again. It's been a hell of a ride, and honestly, I'm just glad it's over. But just when I thought everything was behind me, I got hit with one last curve. Surprise. Yeah, because of course something else had to happen, right? So here's what went down. I was at work one day, just doing my thing at the restaurant, when one of our regulars, Tom, comes in. Now, Tom's an older guy. Been coming to the restaurant for years, real friendly with my family, always chatting with my parents whenever he's in. But this time, he's got this weird look on his face. He pulls me aside and says, "Hey, Ethan, I saw Laura the other night." At this point, I'm thinking, all right, whatever. People see Laura all the time. What's new? But then he drops this little nugget. "She was with your cousin, Chris." I swear, my brain short-circuited for a second. I'm like, wait, what? Chris? No way. I mean, Chris and I are family. We grew up together. There's no way he'd be hanging out with my ex-fiancée, right? But Tom was dead serious. He goes, "Yeah, man, they were at that new bar downtown. Seemed real close, if you know what I mean." I didn't know what to say. Part of me didn't believe it, but another part of me was like, well, this is Laura we're talking about, so who knows? I just kind of laughed it off and told Tom I'd check it out later. But inside, I was boiling. I had no idea what to think. Why would Chris, of all people, be hanging out with Laura? And why didn't anyone tell me? So, naturally, I did what any guy would do. I went straight to the source. I texted Chris that night, asked him what was up. I didn't want to accuse him of anything outright, so I kept it casual like, "Hey man, heard you were out with Laura the other night. What's going on there?" It took him a while to respond, and when he did, the response was, well, let's just say it wasn't what I was expecting. He goes, "Yeah, we've been hanging out a bit. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it'd be awkward." Awkward? Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. My cousin, my flesh and blood, was hanging out with my ex-fiancé behind my back, and he thought it was just a little awkward. I was pissed, like beyond pissed. I shot back, "Dude, what the hell? You couldn't give me a heads up?" He tried to play it off, saying it wasn't a big deal and that they were just friends, nothing serious. But come on, we all know what just friends means, especially when it's between an ex and your cousin. I wasn't buying it, and I told him straight up that I felt betrayed. He started backpedaling, saying he didn't mean for it to happen, that they just bumped into each other one night, and things kind of escalated from there. Apparently, they'd been talking for a few weeks now. Weeks! I had to sit with that for a while. I mean, how do you even process something like that? It wasn't just about Laura anymore. It was about family. Someone I trusted, someone I grew up with, decided it was cool to start hanging out with my ex like nothing was wrong. And honestly, it hurt more than I thought it would. A few days later, I got a text from Laura herself. She didn't even try to ease into it, just hit me with, "Hey, I heard you're upset about me and Chris. Can we talk?" I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her excuses or explanations or whatever she was about to throw at me. But at the same time, I needed closure. I needed to know why she thought this was okay. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet up. We met at this coffee shop we used to go to when we were still together. Bad idea, by the way. Too many memories. Anyway, she sits down and immediately launches into this whole spiel about how she didn't mean to hurt me, how she and Chris just clicked, and that she didn't want things to get weird between us. I sat there trying to keep my cool, but honestly, I just wanted to walk out. I told her, "It's not about you guys clicking. It's about respect. You ended things with me, and now you're hanging out with my cousin? You didn't think that might be a problem?" She gave me some crap about how she didn't plan for this to happen, that it just did, and that she didn't want to hurt me, but I wasn't buying it. I told her straight up, "You made your choice. You don't get to walk back into my life and act like everything's cool now." The conversation didn't go anywhere. She tried to justify it, I wasn't having it, and we both walked away more frustrated than before. I didn't feel any better, but at least I got to say my piece. After that, I blocked her number. I didn't want to deal with her anymore. As for Chris, we had it out too. He called me a few days later, trying to clear the air. I let him talk, but I didn't hold back. I told him he broke my trust, and that's not something you just bounce back from. He apologized, said he didn't mean for things to get messy, but I wasn't ready to forgive him. Family or not, there's a line you don't cross, and he crossed it. Since then, I've been keeping my distance from both of them. Chris still tries to text me now and then, but I haven't responded. Maybe one day I'll get over it, but right now, I need space. As for Laura, she's out of my life for good. I don't know if she's still with Chris, and honestly, I don't care. They can do whatever they want. I'm done. Looking back, this whole situation taught me a lot. Not just about relationships, but about people in general. You think you know someone, you think you can trust them, and then they go and do something like this. It messes with your head, but at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself. You can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond to it. And right now, my response is to walk away. I've got my own life to live, my own goals to chase, and I'm not letting this drama drag me down anymore. Story 2. This story is titled, "My Adopted Sister Falsely Accused Me of SA. 7 years later, the truth is out and now they're begging for my help." Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Before I get into the meat of this shit show, you need to know where I was coming from. I, 28 male, grew up in what I thought was a solid family. Upper middle class neighborhood in the suburbs of Chicago. My parents seemed to have their shit together, at least on the surface. Dad was a financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, made good money that afforded us a comfortable lifestyle. Mom worked part-time as a realtor, but mostly focused on what she called maintaining the family image, which basically meant being involved in every community organization possible and making sure our family looked perfect on Christmas cards. I was their biological son, the golden boy who did everything right. Straight A's without much effort, naturally athletic, polite to adults. I wasn't perfect by any means. Got into my share of trouble as a teenager, sneaking beers with friends, the occasional party that got too loud, but nothing serious. Nothing that would tarnish the family reputation my mom worked so hard to maintain. When I was 10, they adopted Lily, 3F at the time, because mom always wanted a daughter. I remember the day they brought her home. Tiny little thing with these big brown eyes that had everyone wrapped around her finger within minutes. And I'll admit, I was kind of a dick to her at first. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of attention anymore. Everything was about Lily. Lily's first day of preschool. Lily's dance recital. Lily's cute new outfit. Looking back, it was normal sibling jealousy. But at the time, it felt like I was being replaced. As we grew up, I thought we developed a decent sibling relationship. Nothing special, but normal. We fought sometimes, but I always looked out for her. When she was in second grade, some kid kept pulling her hair and pushing her on the playground. I was in ninth grade by then, and I remember walking her to elementary school one day and having a very clear conversation with the little punk. No one messed with her after that. I even taught her to defend herself. Basic stuff like how to throw a proper punch if she absolutely needed to. I was her big brother, you know? By my senior year of college, I was killing it. Captain of our Division II baseball team with serious prospects for at least minor league ball. Had a 3.85 GPA in business administration with a minor in finance. Had a solid group of friends. The kind of guys who would help you move or pick you up at 3 a.m. if your car broke down. And I spent a lot of time in the gym. Had been lifting seriously since high school. And by college, I was in the best shape of my life. Bench pressing 315 for reps, squatting 405, deadlifting 495. Had that V-taper everyone works for. Broad shoulders, narrow waist, visible abs year-round. Not trying to sound conceited here, just painting the picture of where I was at in life. I dated a few girls seriously over the years, but nothing that stuck. Was mostly focused on my future, to be honest. Dad had connections at several investment firms in Chicago, and I was set to enter a management training program at one of the big ones after graduation. My path was clear. Finish school strong, maybe play ball for a couple more years if I got the chance, then settle into a career in finance. Eventually find the right girl, get married, have kids, the whole American dream package. That was the plan anyway. Lily was 15 by then, a sophomore in high school. She'd grown into this artsy theater kid, always in some school play, always dramatically overreacting to everything. But that's teenagers for you. She had her own friends, her own life. We'd grab dinner together when I was home from college on breaks, catch up on life. Normal sibling stuff, or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs I missed. How she'd get jealous when mom and dad bragged about my baseball achievements. How she'd make little comments about how easy I had it. How she'd sometimes make up elaborate stories about things that happened at school that couldn't possibly be true. But hindsight's 20/20, right? It was a Tuesday in October of my senior year. Just finished a brutal practice where coach ran us into the ground after we'd lost a weekend series to our biggest rivals. My legs felt like jelly. My shoulder was sore from too many bullpen sessions, but in that good way, you know? Like you pushed your body to its limits, and it responded. Hit the showers, changed into jeans and a hoodie, and checked my phone on the way out to my truck. A used F-150 my parents had helped me buy for my 20th birthday. Holy shit. 37 missed calls, 54 texts, messages like, "You sick fuck, how could you? You're dead," all from family members and family friends. My heart started racing immediately. My first thought was that someone had died, maybe grandma or grandpa. I called Dad immediately. "What the hell is going on?" I asked when he answered. His voice was ice cold, something I'd never heard before. "Get your ass home now. Don't you dare go anywhere else." Then he hung up. I stood there in the parking lot, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what was happening. Called Mom. No answer. Called my best friend from high school who still lived near my parents. No answer from him either. It was like everyone had suddenly decided I was radioactive. I drove the 20 minutes home in a daze, my stomach in knots the whole way. NPR was on the radio, but I couldn't focus on a single word they were saying. Pulled into the driveway, and my Uncle Mike's truck was there along with several other cars. Uncle Mike was my dad's younger brother, a construction contractor with a temper who'd never really warmed up to me. Before I could even get out, Uncle Mike charged at me from the front porch, yanked open my truck door, grabbed me by my shirt, and slammed me against the side of the truck. "I'm gonna fucking kill you," he screamed, his face inches from mine. His spit was hitting my face, and I could smell beer on his breath. His eyes were wild, like nothing I'd ever seen before. I could have broken free easily. Mike was 50, out of shape, and I was a 22-year-old athlete in my prime. But I was too shocked to react. Dad and my other uncle, Steve, pulled him off me. "Inside. Now," Dad ordered, not looking me in the eye. I walked up the front steps and into our living room. It was packed. Mom was on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Both sets of grandparents were there, looking grim. Aunts, uncles, even some close family friends. And Lily, my sister, was curled up against Grandma, sobbing into her shoulder. The room went dead silent when I walked in. Everyone was staring at me with this mix of horror and disgust that made my blood run cold. "What the hell is happening?" I demanded, looking around the room for any hint of what was going on. Mom looked up, her face twisted with rage and disgust I'd never seen before. "How could you? Your own sister. What are you talking about?" I was genuinely confused, looking from face to face for some explanation. Dad stepped forward, his normally composed financial advisor demeanor completely gone. He looked like he wanted to tear me apart with his bare hands. "Lily told us everything about how you've been coming into her room at night for years." The accusation hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. "What? That's insane. I never touched her." Lily was sobbing harder now. "You said no one would believe me. You said you'd hurt me if I told. You said it was our secret." "That's fucking bullshit," I yelled, the shock giving way to anger. "I've never said that. I've never done anything to her. What the fuck is going on?" Uncle Mike lunged at me again, but was held back by Dad and Uncle Steve. "My buddy's a cop. You're going to prison, you piece of shit. They're gonna love you in there." I tried to defend myself, tried to make them see how ridiculous this was, but it was like talking to a brick wall. No one was listening. Lily kept remembering more details, making up shit that never happened. Said I first touched her when she was 10, and I was home from high school for Christmas break. Said it had happened dozens of times since then. Said I threatened to hurt her, to hurt Mom and Dad if she ever told anyone. Every word out of her mouth was a complete fabrication, but they were all nodding, consoling her, glaring at me. It was surreal, like I'd stepped into some alternate universe where everything was backward. Then Dad snapped. He'd always been controlled, never violent. But something broke in him. He walked right up and hit me with a right hook that would make heavyweight boxers proud. Caught me square in the jaw and I went down, tasting blood where my teeth had cut into my cheek. "Get your things and get out. You're no son of mine," he said, standing over me, flexing his hand. Mom had already packed some of my clothes in trash bags. They were by the door. Dad grabbed my wallet, took out all the cards with his name on them, credit cards, health insurance, everything. "Dad, please, this isn't true," I begged, blood dripping from my split lip. "You've known me my whole life. You know I would never do something like this." He grabbed me by my shirt, dragged me to the door, and literally threw me down the front steps. I landed hard on my shoulder, feeling something pop that would later turn out to be a minor separation. The bags of clothes followed, then my baseball gear. "If you ever come near this family again, I'll kill you myself," he said, then slammed the door. I sat there on the lawn, blood on my face, shoulder throbbing, neighbors peeking through windows at the commotion. My entire life had just imploded in less than an hour. I spent that night in my truck in the baseball field parking lot, trying to process what had happened. Couldn't sleep. Kept replaying the scene over and over, trying to understand how Lily could do this, how my parents could believe her without even questioning it. By morning, my jaw was swollen and purple, and my shoulder hurt so bad I could barely move my arm. Called a teammate, Ryan, who let me crash on his couch for a week. His roommates weren't thrilled about it, but they tolerated me. I tried calling, texting, emailing everyone in my family. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had known me my entire life. No responses except one text from Dad. "Contact us again, and I'm filing a restraining order. You're dead to us." Ryan tried to help. "Dude, you need to go to the police. File a report about your dad hitting you. Get ahead of this thing." But I couldn't. Something in me couldn't accept that this was really happening. Kept thinking my parents would come to their senses, realize how insane this all was. And honestly, I was scared. What if Lily didn't back down? What if they believed her over me? How would I prove a negative? That I didn't do something? 2 weeks later, I got an email from the university. My tuition payment for the semester was overdue. My parents had canceled it midterm. I went to the financial aid office, tried to get emergency loans, but without a cosigner and with barely any credit history, I was fucked. Had to drop most of my classes to part-time status so I could work full-time to afford even that. Coach was understanding at first. Let me stay on the team, but I missed so many practices because of my new job working security at a bar that I barely played. My grades tanked, went from dean's list to barely passing. Friends started avoiding me because rumors were spreading. Someone in the family had told someone, who told someone else. You know how it goes. Nobody called me a predator to my face, but I saw how people looked at me, how conversations stopped when I entered rooms, how girls would move away if I sat near them in class. 4 months later, my truck broke down. Cracked engine block, thousands to repair. Couldn't afford it. Lost my delivery job that I'd picked up on top of the bar security gig. Got evicted from the shitty apartment I'd been renting with 2 other guys because I couldn't make rent. Started sleeping in the baseball team's equipment shed because coach gave me the code. Taking showers in the locker room. Eating 1 meal a day at the cafeteria with the last of my meal plan. Coach found me there one night in February, below freezing outside, and I was bundled in 3 hoodies and a sleeping bag, using my duffel bag as a pillow. Instead of being pissed, he sat down next to me on the floor. "Son, what the hell happened to you?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. I told him everything. The accusation, my parents' reaction, being cut off, losing my truck, the apartment. He was the first person who actually listened to the whole story. When I finished, he didn't say I was lying, didn't say he believed me either. Just nodded and sat there in silence for a minute. "You can stay here until the end of the semester. After that, I'll help you figure something out." He brought me a space heater the next day and a proper air mattress. Started inviting me to dinner at his house once a week. His wife always packed leftovers for me to take home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Someone giving a shit. I managed to finish the year with a 2.1 GPA, barely avoiding academic probation. But I was done with baseball. The fire was gone. Coach hooked me up with a summer job at a wilderness program for troubled teens in Colorado. Ironic, right? But it paid cash, provided housing in a staff cabin, and kept me fed. That fall, I didn't go back to school. Stayed at the wilderness program, became a full-time guide. Spent days hiking mountains, teaching survival skills to rich kids whose parents didn't know what else to do with them. Built myself back up physically. The work was demanding. Carrying 50-pound packs up mountains, chopping wood, building shelters. Put on 15 pounds of pure muscle in 6 months. At night, I'd get blackout drunk with the other guides. On days off, I experimented with anything I could get my hands on. Weed, acid, shrooms, coke. Wasn't careful. Didn't care. Was trying to numb myself to the reality that my old life was gone forever. After a guide died in a climbing accident that I probably could have prevented if I hadn't been nursing a hangover, the program director pulled me aside. "Jake, you're one of our best guides when you're on. The kids respect you. You know your shit in the field, but you're a liability when you're like this. I can't have you responsible for kids' lives when you're self-destructing." Got fired the next day. Spent the next year living out of my new beater car, a 1998 Honda Civic I bought for $1,200 cash. Worked whatever jobs I could find. Bouncer at bars, security at events, day labor construction. Any job where I could use my size and nobody asked too many questions about my background. I avoided women completely. Avoided families. Would literally walk out of restaurants if a kid sat too close to my table. The fear of being accused again was paralyzing. Had nightmares where I was in prison. Other inmates finding out what I was in for. Would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. One night, I was working security at a college bar in Fort Collins. Recognized a guy from my old university. He'd been on the football team while I was there. He recognized me too. Started telling his friends who I was, what I'd supposedly done. By closing time, they were all giving me looks, making comments just loud enough for me to hear. "Fucking predator. Sick fuck. Someone should teach him a lesson." I tried to ignore it, did my job, escorted the last patrons out at 2 a.m. Was walking to my car when I got jumped in the parking lot. 3 guys from earlier. They'd been waiting. Called me a pedophile, a predator. Said they were going to make sure I couldn't hurt anyone else. I fought back, landed some solid punches, broke one guy's nose for sure. But it was 3 against 1, and they had the element of surprise. Ended up with 3 broken ribs, a fractured eye socket, dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. Guy with the broken nose must have freaked out because they ran off when a car pulled into the lot. The driver called an ambulance. Spent 2 nights in the hospital, then released with no place to go, no health insurance, and a $17,000 medical bill I had no way of paying. The painkillers they gave me barely touched the pain. Couldn't work with my injuries. Slept in my car in Walmart parking lots, taking sponge baths in gas station bathrooms when I could manage to lift my arms. I decided I was done. Just fucking done. It was raining. Middle of the night. I drove to this old bridge outside town, high enough that jumping would definitely do the job. Parked my Civic, walked to the middle, climbed over the railing. My ribs screamed in pain with every movement. Stood there for I don't know how long, rain soaking me, staring down at the dark water. My phone was in my hand. No messages, no calls. For 3 years, absolute silence from my family. No one was coming to save me. No one cared if I lived or died. Bit cold for a swim, don't you think? The voice startled me so bad I almost slipped. I grabbed the railing with my good arm, pain shooting through my broken ribs. Turned to see an old man, had to be in his 70s, standing there in a rain jacket with a fishing pole in his hand. Go away, I said, my voice hoarse. Can't do that, son, he replied calmly, like we were just having a normal conversation on a sunny day. See, if I go away and you jump, that makes me responsible in a way. It's not your problem. Became my problem when I saw you. That's how life works. He moved closer, not threatening, just steady. My name's Frank, retired Marine Corps. Seen plenty of men at their breaking point. You want to tell me what's got you standing on the wrong side of this railing? You wouldn't understand. Try me. I don't know why, but I told him. Everything. The accusation. Being thrown out. The last 3 years. Maybe because I figured I'd be dead soon anyway. Maybe because he was a stranger who didn't immediately look at me like I was a monster. Maybe because something in his eyes reminded me of my grandfather, the only person in my family who might have believed me if he wasn't suffering from dementia. When I finished, he just nodded, exactly like my old coach had. Then he said something I'll never forget. Son, you've been carrying this alone long enough. Put down the weight for one night. Come have a hot meal, dry clothes, and we'll talk about it with clear heads tomorrow. Why would you help someone like me? You don't know if I'm telling the truth. Frank's eyes were sharp, even in the dim light. Been reading men's faces for 50 years in combat and in peace. You're either telling the truth or you're the best damn liar I've ever met. Either way, dead is permanent. Food isn't. I could have ignored him. Could have jumped anyway. Some days I wonder why I didn't. But something about his certainty, his calm in the face of my storm, made me climb back over that railing. Frank's house was small but immaculate. Military precision in everything. Books aligned perfectly on shelves. Shoes exactly parallel by the door. He gave me dry clothes that had belonged to his son who had died in Afghanistan 10 years earlier. Made me take a hot shower while he cooked. That night, I slept on Frank's couch. Actually slept, for the first time in what felt like years. Next morning, he made me breakfast. Eggs, bacon, coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Then he offered me a job. Said he owned a small security firm that did executive protection, event security, and some specialized work for wealthy clients. Needed a young, strong guy who could take orders and keep his mouth shut. Why would you trust me with something like that? I asked. You just met me. I was about to kill myself. Frank looked me dead in the eye. Because a man pushed to the edge who chooses to step back has something worth living for, even if he doesn't know it yet. And because if you screw me over, I know exactly how to find you. For the next 6 months, I lived in Frank's guest room, worked for his company. He was a hard ass. 5 a.m. workouts, strict rules, no drinking on work nights. Made me go to the doctor for my injuries, paid the bills himself, saying I could pay him back when I was on my feet. But he was fair. Paid me well. Taught me about finance, investing, how to dress and talk to clients, how to be professional again. He also made me see a therapist, an old Vietnam vet buddy of his who specialized in PTSD. I resisted at first, but Frank wasn't taking no for an answer. You got your bell rung, son. Not just physically. Need to get your head straight if you're going to work for me. The therapy helped, slowly, taught me that what happened wasn't my fault, that I didn't deserve it, that I wasn't broken beyond repair. I saved enough for my own place after 6 months. A small apartment, nothing fancy, but mine. Clean, safe, started taking classes at the community college, business management, plus some specialized security certifications. Frank became like the father I'd lost. He never pushed me to contact my family, never suggested I try to clear my name. He just said, some battles aren't worth fighting. Focus on the war, building a life they can't take away from you. A year into working for Frank, he sent me to handle security for his niece's art gallery opening. Said it was a favor to his sister, but I know now he was playing matchmaker. Sophie was nothing like I expected. Frank had described her as smart as a whip and doesn't take shit from anyone, which was accurate but incomplete. She was beautiful in this unconventional way. Tall, athletic, with these intense green eyes that seemed to look right through you. Dark hair cut in this asymmetrical style that somehow perfectly framed her face. Not conventionally pretty in a magazine cover way, but striking. The kind of woman who commands attention just by existing. We didn't hit it off at first. She thought I was just some muscle-bound security guy with no brain. I thought she was a stuck-up art snob. During the event, I overheard her explaining some abstract painting to a potential buyer, rolling her eyes when they walked away without purchasing. Not everyone gets it, I said, not really meaning to start a conversation. She looked me up and down, taking in my security uniform. And you do? Number. But I'm not pretending to either. She almost smiled. Almost. Honesty. Refreshing. Throughout the night, I caught her watching me. Not in a make sure the security guy isn't stealing anything way, but with curiosity. I was doing my job, scanning the room, watching the doors, keeping an eye on the more expensive pieces. Professional, alert, but unobtrusive. At the end of the night, as I was doing final checks and the last guests were leaving, she approached me. So, Uncle Frank says you're more than just the muscle. Your uncle talks too much, I replied. She laughed. It was a good laugh. Genuine, not the fake social laugh I'd heard all night. Actually, he barely talks at all, which is why when he does, people listen. He says you're going to school. Business management? Yeah. Plus some specialized security certifications. Interesting combination. Tell me about it. We talked until 2 a.m. About everything except my past. She was smart, funny, challenging in all the right ways. Had traveled extensively, had strong opinions about art and politics and music, but listened to my perspectives too. When I finally said I needed to go because I had an early training session with a new client, she handed me her card. I have a security issue at my condo. Locks need upgrading. Maybe you could give me a consultation? It was a transparent excuse, but I took it. That consultation turned into dinner, which turned into movie nights, which turned into weekends together. Sophie was like no one I'd ever dated. Fiercely independent, passionate about her work, but vulnerable in quiet moments. She'd been hurt too. Not the same way as me, but pain recognizes pain. For months, I avoided talking about my family, made up vague stories when she asked, said my parents had passed away in a car accident, that I was an only child. Sophie knew I was hiding something but didn't push. Frank, though, told me I needed to come clean. That girl is falling for you, he said one day at work as we were planning security for an upcoming event. And you're falling for her. She deserves the truth before it goes any further. He was right. So one night over dinner at my apartment, I told her everything. The whole ugly story. Expected her to leave. To look at me differently. To have that seed of doubt that maybe, just maybe, Lily hadn't been lying. Instead, she took my hand across the table and said, "Thank you for trusting me. I believe you." 3 simple words I hadn't heard from anyone except Frank. I broke down right there at the dinner table, sobbing like a child. She just held me, letting me get it all out. 2 years after we met, I proposed. Did it right, down on one knee in the spot where we'd had our first real date, ring in hand, heart pounding like crazy. Frank walked her down the aisle since her own father had died years before. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, started building a real life. I finished my degree, became a partner in Frank's firm. We expanded from local security to regional, then national contracts. Developed a reputation for professionalism and discretion. Sophie's art career took off. Her work started appearing in major galleries, commanding impressive prices. We were talking about starting a family. I was finally happy, finally at peace. The nightmares were less frequent. I could be around children without panicking. Had even reconnected with a few old friends from college, who'd reached out after hearing snippets of the real story through mutual acquaintances. My old life felt distant, like it had happened to someone else. I still thought about my family sometimes, wondered if they ever doubted Lily's story, if they ever regretted what they'd done. But I had accepted that chapter was closed. I had a new family now, people who chose me, who stood by me. That was enough, or so I thought. It was a random Tuesday in March. I was in my office reviewing security protocols for an upcoming client event, a billionaire tech CEO visiting for a conference who needed discreet protection. My assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Sir, you have a call on line 1. Woman wouldn't give her name, but says it's a family emergency." My first thought was Sophie or Frank. Put her through. I picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is Jake." Not my real name, obviously. Silence. Then a sob. "Jake? It's Mom." My body went cold. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. I wanted to hang up, wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "What do you want?" "Please don't hang up," she begged. "We need to talk to you. It's important." We haven't talked in 7 years. Nothing could be that important. My voice was ice. Lily confessed. She lied about everything. She made it all up. The world stopped. 7 years of pain, of rebuilding my life from nothing, of nightmares and panic attacks and therapy, all because of a lie. A lie I'd always known it was. But hearing her admit it, "Jake, are you there?" I hung up, walked out of my office, told my assistant to cancel my meetings, and drove to Frank's house. After I told him, he just nodded and said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You just don't know if it's the right thing." He was right. Part of me wanted to ignore them. Keep them cut out of my life forever. Another part needed answers. Needed to hear the truth admitted to my face. Sophie felt the same when I told her that night. You need closure, she said. But whatever you decide, I'm with you. And Jake, this doesn't change anything between us. I'm still here, no matter what. For 2 weeks, I ignored the calls and texts that started flooding in. From mom, from dad, even from relatives who had shut me out years ago. Talked it through with my therapist. Yes, I have one. Not ashamed to admit it. Finally decided I needed to face them, but on my terms. I texted my mother. Public place. Coffee shop on Main Street. Sunday, 2 p.m. Just you, Dad, and Lily. I'll have people with me. One chance only. Sunday came. Frank insisted on coming as backup. Sophie was by my side, gripping my hand so tight it almost hurt. We got there early, took a table in the corner where I could see all entrances and exits. Old security habit that never goes away. My stomach was in knots. Part of me still expected them not to show, or for this to be some elaborate trap. Sophie kept checking on me, her eyes full of concern. We can leave anytime, okay? Just say the word. They arrived exactly at 2. Mom looked older than I remembered, hair more gray than brown now, face lined with stress. Dad had lost weight, almost gone, his expensive suits replaced by khakis and a button-down that had seen better days. Lily, now 22, looked completely different from the teenager I remembered. Her face was thinner, her eyes downcast. None of the dramatic flair she'd always had. Mom saw me first. Her eyes filled with tears, and she rushed forward, arms outstretched for a hug. I stepped back, putting Sophie slightly between us. Sit. No one spoke for what felt like minutes. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Son, I'm not your son. I cut him off. You made that very clear 7 years ago. Now talk. Why am I here? Mom started crying. Dad looked broken. Lily still stared at the floor. 3 months ago, Dad began, his voice rough. Lily called a family meeting. She told us that she had lied. About everything. I looked at Lily. Look at me. Slowly, she raised her eyes. They were red from crying. Why? My voice didn't even sound like my own. She took a shaky breath. I was jealous. You were the perfect son. Star athlete, smart. Everyone loved you. Mom and Dad gave you everything. I wanted them to love me more, to pay attention to me. So you accused me of something that could have sent me to prison? Destroyed my entire life? The anger I thought I'd processed years ago came rushing back. I didn't think it would go that far, she whispered. I thought they'd just get mad at you, maybe ground you. But then everyone started asking questions, and I couldn't take it back. And then it just kept going. Everyone was being so nice to me, giving me things, making me feel special. I didn't know how to stop it. And you two, I looked at my parents. You threw me out without even listening to me, without any proof. Dad tried to explain. We thought we were protecting her. She was our little girl, and I was your son. I slammed my hand on the table. The whole coffee shop went quiet. People at nearby tables pretended not to listen, but they were all ears. I wasn't even home for the 4th of July weekend she claimed it happened. I was at a baseball tournament in Denver. There were pictures all over social media. Did you even check? Mom put her hand over her mouth. Dad went pale. You know what happened after you threw me out? My truck broke down. I lost my apartment. I slept in the baseball equipment shed. I almost died from exposure, from being beaten up by people who heard rumors. I stood on a bridge ready to jump because the family who was supposed to love me believed the worst without a single question. I pulled out my phone, showed them pictures. Me with my black eye and split lip from the bar fight. Me looking emaciated during my homeless period. My hospital records from the beating. I was your son! My voice broke. Sophie squeezed my hand. Frank put his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. We're so sorry, Mom sobbed. We made a terrible mistake. We want to make it right. Make it right? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How exactly do you plan to do that? Give me back 7 years of my life? Erase the nightmares? Undo the trauma of being homeless? Of being beaten? Of standing on that bridge ready to die? Mom was full-on sobbing now. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. We want you to come home, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. We want our family back together. That's not happening. I have a family now. I looked at Sophie and Frank, people who actually stood by me. Lily finally spoke up. There's something else you should know. She told me how after her confession, everything changed. My parents had cut her off financially, took away the car they'd bought her for her 16th birthday, a fucking BMW while I was sleeping in my truck, and sold it. She had to drop out of her expensive private university and work retail while taking night classes at community college. Dad's company had suffered after some bad investments, and they had to downsize from their big house to a condo. Mom's social standing in the community was ruined when word got out about Lily's lie. "We need your help, Jake," Mom admitted finally, looking ashamed. "Your father's business is struggling. We're going to lose the condo. Lily can't afford to continue school. We've had to sell almost everything." And there it was. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted money. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. "Let me get this straight. You destroy my life, disown me, leave me homeless. And now that I've managed to build a successful life despite you, you want me to bail you out?" "We're family," Dad said weakly. "Number. We're not." I stood up. "You made your choice 7 years ago. Now you can live with it." "Please," Lily begged, tears streaming down her face. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Mom and Dad shouldn't suffer for my mistake." "You're right. They should suffer for their mistake." I looked at my parents. "I forgive Lily. She was a child who made a terrible choice. But you two were adults who should have protected both your children. Instead, you threw one away without a second thought." I put money on the table for our coffee. As we were leaving, Mom grabbed my arm. "Please don't leave it like this. What can we do? What do you want from us?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I want you to remember how it feels to have everything taken away, to feel helpless, to have no one believe in you. Maybe then you'll understand what you did to me." Sophie, Frank, and I walked out. As we reached the car, Frank squeezed my shoulder. "Proud of you, son. That was 2 years ago. I've heard through mutual connections that my parents lost the condo. Dad works at a big box store now. Mom cleans houses. Lily dropped out of school completely and moved to another state. Sometimes I think about reaching out. Sophie says that would be the final step in my healing. Forgiveness not for their sake, but for mine. Frank says it's my choice and he'll back me either way. For now, I'm focusing on my own family. Sophie is pregnant with our first child. We're expanding the security firm into 3 new states, building something real that can't be taken away. Edit 2. To answer some common questions. Yes, I've considered pressing charges against Lily for false accusations, but the statute of limitations has passed in my state. No, I don't feel bad about not helping my parents financially. They made their bed. And yes, Sophie is doing great with the pregnancy. Thanks for asking. Edit 3. A lot of you are saying I should help Lily since she was just a kid when this happened. Maybe you're right, but she was 15, not 5, old enough to know what she was doing. And she let me suffer for 7 years before coming clean. That said, I might reach out to her someday. Just not ready yet. Edit 4. For those asking if I'm going to let my parents meet their grandchild, I genuinely don't know. Will they be in the delivery room? Absolutely fucking not. Will they ever babysit? Hell no. But maybe supervised visits someday when I can be sure they won't poison my kid against me with more lies. And only if they get extensive therapy and take full responsibility. Edit 5. Some people are calling this story fake. Whatever. Believe what you want. Why would I make up something this fucked up? I came here to process and maybe help others who've been falsely accused, not for internet points. Edit 6. Thank you to everyone who shared similar stories in the comments. It helps knowing I'm not alone in this. And to the person who asked why I don't hate all women now, because I'm not an incel moron who thinks one person's actions define an entire gender. My wife is a woman, in case you missed that part of the story. Story 3. My family disowned me years ago over false allegations from my brother's girlfriend. Now that the truth came out, they're trying to come back into my life, unaware of the new life and family I've built without them. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. All right, Reddit. This story is going to mess with your head. I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. This happened about 8 years ago, but I'm finally ready to put it all out there because honestly, keeping this to myself has been eating me alive. So picture this. I, 32 male, was living at home while finishing my engineering degree and working part-time at a local garage. I was 24 years old back then. My younger brother Kai was 22, and he'd been dating this girl Anita for about a year and a half. She was one of those girls who seemed perfect on paper. Pretty, smart, came from a good family. My parents absolutely loved her, always talking about how lucky Kai was and how she was perfect daughter-in-law material. I never really liked her though. Something about her always felt fake to me. She'd be all sweet and innocent around my parents, but I caught her being pretty nasty to service workers when she thought nobody was looking. Plus, she had this way of making these little comments about me that sounded like jokes, but weren't really jokes, you know? Like she'd say stuff like, "Oh, still living at home? When are you going to get your life together like Kai?" With this smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kai was completely whipped. This dude would cancel plans with friends, skip family events, basically reorganize his entire life around whatever Anita wanted. It was painful to watch, but he was my brother, and I figured he'd eventually figure it out on his own. The day everything went to hell started normal enough. I was supposed to help Kai move some furniture from his apartment to his new place. We'd planned to meet there around 3 p.m. to get started, but around 1:30 he texted me asking if I could head over early because his car was making weird noises and he needed to stop by the shop to get it looked at. He said he might be an hour late, but that Anita would be there to let me in and we could start packing some of the smaller stuff. No big deal, right? I figured I'd grab some coffee on the way and maybe get a head start on boxing up his books or whatever. Kai had given me his spare key months ago when he first moved in, so I didn't think twice about it. I got to his apartment building around 1:45 and took the elevator up to the third floor. The hallway was quiet. Most people were probably at work on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked up to Kai's door and was about to knock when I heard voices inside. Figured Anita was maybe on the phone or watching TV. I used my key to unlock the door and stepped inside, calling out, "Hey, it's me," so I wouldn't startle her. That's when I saw them. Anita was pressed up against the wall in Kai's living room, with Alan's hands all over her. They were making out like teenagers, completely lost in each other. Alan, my brother's friend since college, the guy who'd been to every birthday party and family barbecue for the past 3 years. "What the hell?" I shouted. They broke apart instantly. Anita's face went from passion to pure panic in about half a second. Alan spun around and went white as a sheet when he saw me standing there. For a moment, nobody said anything. I was furious. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said, looking back and forth between them. "In my brother's own apartment?" For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Anita started crying. She pushed Alan away and started backing toward the corner of the room, sobbing and saying, "Please don't tell him," over and over. Alan stepped between us with this weird protective stance. "Dude, you need to leave," he said. "Just go." Like I was the one who didn't belong there. "Kai is my brother." "What the hell do you think you're doing, Alan?" That's when Anita really started freaking out. She was hyperventilating, saying things like, "He's going to tell everyone, and Kai will never forgive me." I tried to calm her down, but she just kept getting more hysterical, and Alan kept telling me to leave. Finally, I said screw it and walked out. I figured I'd call Kai and let him handle it. I drove home thinking about how I was going to break this news to my brother. It was going to destroy him, but he needed to know. The guy deserved better than being played for a fool by someone he trusted. But near the evening, my phone started blowing up with calls from Kai. When I answered, he was screaming at me. "What the hell did you do to Anita?" The conversation with Kai was like something out of a nightmare. He was so angry I could barely understand what he was saying at first. Apparently, Anita had called him immediately after I left, crying and telling him that I had attacked her at his place. Her story was that she was alone when I had shown up, and while helping with the furniture, I forced myself on her. Alan was backing up her story, claiming he walked into us and he tried to stop me, but I was too strong, and that I had threatened both of them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Kai, that's completely insane. I caught them making out. She's cheating on you with Alan." "Shut up! You're a liar," he said. "Anita would never cheat on me. She loves me. You're just jealous because you can't get a girl like her." The jealousy angle hit me hard because it was so ridiculous. I'd never been jealous of Kai's relationship. If anything, I'd felt bad for him because I could see how manipulative she was. I tried to explain what I had actually seen, but Kai wasn't having it. He said Anita was talking to the police. The police. I felt like I was in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. "Kai, please, you have to listen to me. I'm your brother." "Why would I lie about this?" "Because you've always hated her," he said. "You've never been able to stand seeing me happy. Well, congratulations. You might have just destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." He hung up on me. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to figure out what just happened. 20 minutes ago, I was worried about telling my brother his girlfriend was cheating. Now apparently I was a predator. I drove to my parents' house, went inside and found them in the kitchen. They already knew. Kai had called them first, and they were both sitting there looking at me like I was a stranger. My mom was crying, and my dad was just staring at me with this expression I'd never seen before. "Is it true?" my dad asked. "Is what true? That I caught Anita cheating and she's lying about it to cover her tracks?" "Yeah, that's true." My mom gasped like I had just confessed to murder. How could you do this to your brother? To that sweet girl? I tried to explain what really happened, but they weren't listening any better than Kai had. They had already decided I was guilty. They'd rather believe their son was capable of assault than admit their perfect future daughter-in-law was a cheater. The next few hours were surreal. Kai came home with Anita. She was playing the victim perfectly, crying whenever anyone looked at her, flinching when I entered the room. She'd clearly studied how trauma victims behave and was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. Kai wouldn't even look at me. When I tried to talk to him, he told me to stay away from his girlfriend. My own brother was treating me like a predator in our own house. The worst part was watching my parents comfort Anita. My mom was making her tea and telling her how brave she was. My dad was patting Kai on the back and telling him what a good man he was for standing by his woman. Meanwhile, I was sitting right there, their actual son, and they were treating me like a monster. Nobody was asking me for my side of the story. Nobody seemed to care that their son and brother might be innocent. They had already made up their minds. That night, Kai cornered me in the hallway outside my room. He was different than I'd ever seen him, angry in a way that was almost scary. If you ever go near Anita again, I will beat the hell out of you myself, he said. The little brother I taught to throw a football was talking to me like I was his worst enemy. Kai, she's lying. I swear to God, she's lying. I caught her cheating and she's covering it up. He grabbed me by the shirt and slammed me against the wall. My little brother was looking at me like he wanted to kill me. You're going to keep lying even now? He said. Even after what you did to her? You're sick, man. You're really sick. I pushed him off me. Fine, don't believe me. But when you find out the truth, don't come crying to me. The only truth is that my brother is a monster, he said, and I'm never going to forgive you for this. 2 days later, the police showed up at our house with a warrant for my arrest. I knew it was coming. Anita had filed a formal complaint, and Alan was corroborating her story. But actually being handcuffed in front of my neighbors was humiliating beyond words. The detective handling my case was this older guy who clearly thought I was guilty from the start. During the interrogation, he kept asking me things like, "Did you plan this, or was it a crime of passion?" Like he was just trying to get me to confess to something I didn't do. He had this tired, seen-it-all attitude that told me he'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't buying mine. I told him the truth, that I had caught Anita cheating and she was lying to cover it up. But he said that's what guys like me always say. Apparently, claiming the victim was lying was such a common defense that it actually made me look more guilty. My parents kept asking me if I was sure that's what happened, like maybe I was confused or afraid to tell the truth. The only person who believed me was my friend Jensen, who said he'd known Anita was sketchy from day one. The investigation dragged on for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of my life just suspended while the police interviewed witnesses and collected evidence. The house was like a war zone. Kai and Anita were there constantly, and she was milking the victim role for everything it was worth. She'd have panic attacks whenever I was in the room and would cry to my parents about how traumatized she was. The performance never stopped, even when she thought no one was watching. Kai was her loyal guard dog through all of it. He'd sit with her during her episodes and glare at me like I was some kind of animal that needed to be contained. My parents were completely buying into it too. They'd comfort Anita and tell her how sorry they were that their son had done this to her. I felt like a ghost haunting my own house. The worst part was that nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. Whenever I tried to explain what really happened, they'd shut me down and say I was re-traumatizing the victim. I was guilty until proven innocent, and maybe not even then. My college suspended me pending the outcome of the investigation. My job fired me for conduct unbecoming. Friends stopped calling and returning texts. Word got around our small town pretty quickly, and I couldn't go anywhere without people staring and whispering. Jensen was the only one who stuck by me. He'd come over and hang out, which was awkward because Kai would leave the room whenever Jensen showed up. Jensen kept saying he knew I was innocent and that the truth would come out eventually. Sometimes I wondered if he was just being loyal or if he actually believed me, but his support was the only thing keeping me sane. After about a month, the detective called me in for another interview. He said they had been investigating Alan's story and found some inconsistencies. Apparently, Alan had changed his story twice about what exactly he had seen, and his timeline didn't match up with Anita's. When you're lying, it's hard to keep all the details straight, especially under police scrutiny. The detective also told me they had requested Anita's phone records and found some interesting text messages. He wouldn't tell me what they said, but his attitude toward me had definitely changed. He was asking different questions, like whether I had any proof of the affair I claimed to have discovered. Now for my absolute shitty luck, there were no security cameras around Kai's place. I had no proof except for what I saw with my own eyes, which was apparently not enough. 2 weeks later, the charges were dropped. The detective called to tell me that they had found no evidence to support Anita's claims, and several pieces of evidence that contradicted her story. He said they wouldn't be pursuing the case further. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger that it had taken 6 weeks to reach the obvious conclusion. You'd think that would be the end of it, but you'd be wrong. My parents' reaction to the charges being dropped was basically, well, just because they can't prove it doesn't mean it didn't happen. They said they were disappointed in the justice system and that they knew what they believed. It was like they were more invested in being right than in their son being innocent. Kai was even worse. He said dropping the charges didn't prove anything. The mental gymnastics were incredible. Rather than admit they'd been wrong, they doubled down on their belief that I was guilty. But the worst part was that they all stayed loyal to Anita. Even after the charges were dropped, even after it was clear her story didn't hold up, my family chose to believe her over me. She was still coming to family dinners. Kai was still treating her like his princess. My parents were still treating her like their future daughter-in-law. I was the one who was unwelcome in my own house. My parents said I could stay until I figured things out, but it was clear they wanted me gone. Kai made it obvious that he couldn't stand being in the same room as me. The house that had been my home for 24 years suddenly felt hostile and foreign. The final straw came about 2 weeks after the charges were dropped. I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen about how they were concerned about having me around and how they needed to think about Anita's comfort. They were literally choosing my brother's lying girlfriend over their own son. The conversation I overheard was brutal. They were discussing whether to ask me to move out permanently because my presence was upsetting to Anita. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car. I left a note saying I was leaving town and not to look for me. I drove straight to Jensen's place and told him I was done. Done with my family. Done with that town. Done with trying to prove my innocence to people who had already decided I was guilty. Jensen tried to talk me out of it, said I should stay and fight, but I was finished fighting. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away, even when walking away means losing everything you thought mattered. I knew even if I fought back, the damage was already done, and I had no evidence. I knew I had no place with my family anymore. I headed north with no real plan except to get as far away as possible. Ended up in Montreal because it was the first major city I hit after crossing the border, and honestly, the distance felt right. I figured if I was going to disappear, I might as well do it properly. The French signs and different money made it feel like a completely different world, which was exactly what I needed. The first few months were rough as hell. I was living in this tiny studio apartment in a sketchy part of town, working construction jobs that paid cash under the table. My French was garbage, so I mostly worked with other English speakers who were just as desperate for work as I was. The construction crew became like a temporary family. Guys who didn't ask questions about your past and judged you only on whether you could swing a hammer and show up on time. The hardest part was the isolation. For the first time in my life, I didn't have anyone. No family, no childhood friends, no connections at all. Just me in a foreign country, trying to figure out how to rebuild my entire existence from scratch. Some nights I'd sit in that tiny apartment eating ramen and wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The work was brutal, but therapeutic. There's something about building things with your hands that helps clear your head when everything else is falling apart. I specialized in framing and drywall, work that required focus and precision. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep, and the satisfaction of seeing a building come together piece by piece gave me something to be proud of when everything else felt hopeless. I changed my name legally after about 6 months. It cost me almost everything I had saved, but I needed to shed that old identity completely. Every time I saw my old name on documents, it reminded me of everything that had happened. The new name felt like putting on clean clothes after being covered in mud. Jensen stayed in touch, which probably saved my sanity. He'd call every couple of weeks to check in and eventually started visiting me a few times a year. It was good to have one person from my old life who still believed in me. He'd update me on what was happening back home, though most of it I didn't want to hear. Hearing about my family's life continuing without me was like picking at a scab that wouldn't heal. Apparently, Kai and Anita got more serious after I left. He proposed to her with some elaborate setup in the park where they'd had their first date. My parents were thrilled about it, constantly talking about wedding plans and grandchildren. Kai had gotten a promotion at his job, and they'd settled into domestic life together. From the outside, it looked like the perfect happy ending, except for the son and brother they'd thrown away to make it happen. Jensen never said it directly, but I could tell he thought my family was messed up for choosing Anita over me. He'd make comments about how weird it was that they never asked about me, or seemed concerned about where I'd gone. But he was loyal to me, not them, so he kept those observations to himself mostly. He did mention that some of our mutual friends had started asking questions about my disappearance, but Kai and my parents had just said I'd moved away for work. After about a year, I started getting my life together for real. I enrolled in a college program to finish my engineering degree, using my new identity and Canadian residency status. The transition back to academic life was jarring after months of physical labor, but it felt good to be using my brain again. Made a few friends, nothing deep, but people to grab a drink with or watch hockey games. The work situation improved too. I landed a job with a construction company that specialized in commercial buildings. The pay was decent and the work was satisfying. I started dating again around year 2, though trust was still a major issue. But slowly, gradually, I learned to open up. Started having a routine, a decent apartment, a job I didn't hate, and a few people who knew me as just a regular guy helped restore my confidence. The real breakthrough came in year 3 when I met April at a coffee shop near campus. She was a nursing student, originally from Vancouver, and we hit it off immediately. She was patient with my trust issues, never pushed when I was obviously uncomfortable. We took things incredibly slow. I told her I had a complicated past, but didn't go into details. She didn't push for information, which made me trust her even more. By the time I was ready to tell her the whole story, we'd been together for almost a year, and she already knew me well enough to know I wasn't capable of what I'd been accused of. April changed everything for me. She helped me remember who I was before everything got destroyed. Her family background was completely different from mine. She'd grown up in a stable household where parents actually communicated with their kids and worked through problems instead of choosing sides. When she talked about her childhood, it sounded like stories from a different planet. We got serious pretty quickly once I opened up to her. She was the first person besides Jensen who heard the whole story and immediately said, "That's completely insane that your family believed her over you." Having someone validate that it was crazy, that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic, was huge for my mental health. When April brought me home to Vancouver to meet them, they welcomed me like I'd always been part of their family. Her dad taught me to fish on the Fraser River. Her mom shared family recipes that had been passed down for generations. And nobody questioned my past or made me feel like I had to prove myself. They just accepted that I was important to April, and that was enough for them. April's parents had been married for 30 years and still acted like they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. After about 2 years together, April got pregnant. Twins, which was both terrifying and amazing. We were having a boy and a girl, and I remember thinking that these kids would never know the pain of being abandoned by their family. When the kids were born, everything clicked into place. Holding my son and daughter for the first time, I knew I would literally die before letting anyone hurt them the way I had been hurt. These kids were going to grow up knowing their father would always believe them, always support them, always be on their side. The kids are 4 now, and they're everything to me. April's family stepped up in ways that blew my mind. Her parents moved to Montreal to be closer to the grandkids, taking early retirement to help us with childcare. Her dad helped me buy a house in a good neighborhood with decent schools, co-signing the mortgage when my credit history wasn't quite strong enough. Her mom basically moved in for the first month after the twins were born, doing laundry, cooking meals, and teaching April and me how to handle 2 babies at once. I got promoted to project manager at the construction company, which came with better pay and more flexible hours. The promotion meant I could spend more time with the kids while still advancing my career. April finished her nursing degree and got a job at the children's hospital, which was perfect because she could relate to what the families were going through. We were actually living a dream. Good jobs, nice house, healthy kids, supportive extended family. The kids grew up thinking they had one set of grandparents and that was normal. I told April's parents the truth about my family, and they made it clear that as far as they were concerned, I was their son now. They took their grandparent duties seriously, showing up for every birthday party, school play, and soccer game. My kids called them Grandma and Grandpa and got spoiled rotten just like any other grandchildren. Jensen kept visiting, usually twice a year, and became like an uncle to the kids. They loved him, and he loved being able to spoil them and then give them back to us when they got cranky. He'd still update me on what was happening back home, though by now I mostly didn't want to know. Kai and Anita had gotten married in this big expensive wedding that my parents had apparently paid for. They'd bought a house 3 streets over from where we grew up, close enough to my parents that Anita could continue her perfect daughter-in-law act. Kai was working at the same engineering firm where my dad had worked before retiring. It was like they were living the life I was supposed to have, with the woman who had destroyed my chance at having it. Jensen said my parents still never mentioned me or asked how I was doing. It was like I had never existed. They'd created this alternate reality where their son was Kai and their daughter-in-law was Anita, and I was just erased from the family history. Honestly, by that point, it didn't hurt as much as it used to. I had a family that actually cared about me. Kids who thought I was a hero for being able to fix their broken toys and make pancakes on Saturday mornings, and a life built on truth instead of lies. 8 years after everything fell apart, and 5 years of peaceful family life with April and the twins, the universe decided to test me again. It was a Saturday morning, and I was helping my son with his math homework while my daughter and April were at the grocery store. Just a normal weekend morning. The doorbell rang, and I figured it was probably a neighbor or delivery guy. My son ran to answer it before I could stop him. I heard him talking to someone but couldn't make out what was being said. Then he came running back looking confused. "Dad, there's an old man at the door who says he's your father." My stomach dropped. I walked to the front door, and there was my father, standing on my porch in Canada, looking older and more tired than I remembered, but definitely him. He was wearing a winter coat that looked expensive, but hung loose on his frame, like he'd lost weight recently. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. This man who had disowned me 8 years ago was somehow standing at my door like something out of a nightmare. "Hello, son," he said quietly. His voice was the same, but there was something broken in it. I slammed that door so hard the whole frame shook. All those old feelings of betrayal and anger came flooding back like it had happened yesterday. My hands were shaking, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. My dad kept knocking and calling my name, my old name, which sounded foreign after all these years. "Please, son, open that door and let me talk to you. I know you're angry, but please let me explain." The desperation in his voice was something I'd never heard before. But then April got home with our daughter, and she was asking who was that man at the door. I explained the situation as simply as I could. April had heard the whole story, obviously, but she'd never expected to actually meet any of my family. She was furious on my behalf, but she told me to take my time and see what he wanted while she'd keep the kids busy. She took them to their rooms and gave me space to deal with whatever this was. Then I opened the door and let my father in. He looked around the house, taking in the family photos on the walls, the kids' artwork on the refrigerator, the obvious signs of a happy family life. There were pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, school events, years of memories that he'd never been part of. "You've done well for yourself," he said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "No thanks to you," I replied. "What do you want?" He sat down heavily on my couch and suddenly looked every one of his 73 years. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I need to tell you something. Something we discovered last month." What my father told me next was both vindicating and infuriating at the same time. Apparently, Kai and Anita's marriage wasn't the fairy tale everyone thought it was. About 6 months ago, Kai had started noticing some weird behavior from Anita, being secretive with her phone, making excuses to go out alone, staying late at work for projects that never seemed to materialize. Kai decided to do some detective work before confronting her. He followed Anita one evening when she said she was going to her book club, only to see her car parked outside a restaurant downtown. He waited in his car for 3 hours until she came out with Alan, but he didn't confront them immediately. Instead, he started paying attention to everything: her schedule, her excuses, her behavior when she thought he wasn't watching. He started documenting the affair. He followed them for weeks, getting photos and video evidence of their relationship. Turns out she was still having an affair with Alan, who was now married with kids of his own. They'd been meeting at hotels, at Alan's office after hours. The affair had never really ended. They'd just gotten better at hiding it. But here's the part that made my blood boil. They'd been carrying on this affair for years. Not months, years. It had been going on since before I caught them the first time and continued through their entire marriage. Kai found credit card records showing regular hotel visits throughout their marriage, plus evidence that they'd been meeting even before the wedding. She'd been living a double life for basically their entire relationship. He'd also discovered text messages between them. What was in those messages was devastating. They'd been planning their future together, talking about leaving their respective spouses, even discussing what they'd do if anyone found out about their history. The kicker? During their marriage, Alan had gotten her pregnant, and she'd had an abortion without telling Kai, terrified it might not be his. The messages showed them laughing about how clueless Kai was and how easy it had been to fool everyone. In those messages, Anita was also terrified about the family finding out the truth about everything they had done. She was paranoid that I would somehow prove my innocence and expose their lies. They'd even discussed what they'd do if I ever came back and tried to tell people what really happened. When Kai finally confronted her with all the evidence, she broke down and confessed everything. She admitted that she and Alan had been involved before Kai, that they'd never really stopped seeing each other, and that when I caught them that day years ago, she panicked and made up the assault story to cover her tracks. She broke down completely and admitted to lying about everything. She'd married Kai while still in love with Alan. She'd let my family destroy me to protect her secret. And she'd been planning to leave Kai for Alan as soon as Alan's divorce was finalized, and they could be together openly. My father had discovered all this when Kai came to him for advice about the divorce. Kai was completely destroyed, asking how he could have been so blind, how he could have wasted years of his life on someone who never loved him, and how he had destroyed his relationship with his brother for a woman who had been lying about everything from the beginning. Kai is beside himself, my father said. He knows he destroyed his relationship with his brother for a cheater. He wants to call you, to apologize, but he doesn't even know how to find you. He's been asking everyone if they know where you went, but you just disappeared completely. I sat there trying to process all this information. 8 years too late, my family finally knew the truth. 8 years after they'd thrown me away like garbage, they'd finally figured out that I'd been telling the truth all along. The vindication felt hollow after so much time had passed. And what about you? I asked my father. What's your excuse for believing her over your own son? He looked down at his hands, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. I don't have one. We were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. We let that girl manipulate us into destroying our own family, and we've spent years living with the consequences. Have you, though? I asked. Because from what Jensen tells me, you all seem pretty happy with your choice. You got your perfect daughter-in-law, your fairy tale wedding, your happy family. You just erased me from the picture and moved on like I never existed. We tried to, he admitted, but not a day went by that I didn't think about you. Wonder where you were, if you were okay, if you'd ever forgive us. Your mother. She's never been the same. She's been on antidepressants for years, crying every Christmas and birthday because her son isn't there. She keeps your old room exactly the same, like she's waiting for you to come home. Her son was there, I said. You just chose to believe I was a predator instead of listening to me. We talked for about 2 hours. He told me about how Kai's world had fallen apart when he learned the truth, how my mother had been devastated to discover what they'd done to an innocent son, how they'd all been trying to figure out how to find me and make amends. He said they'd hired a private investigator who eventually tracked me down in Montreal. I told him about my life, my wife, my kids, my career, my in-laws who treated me like family. I showed him pictures of his grandchildren that he'd never meet, told him about the family traditions we'd created, the life I'd built from nothing. I explained how April's parents had stepped into the grandparent role, and how my kids had never known they were missing anything. I want to make this right, he said. I know I can't undo what we did, but maybe we can find a way forward. Maybe we can be a family again. There is no way forward, I told him. You made your choice 8 years ago. You chose to believe a liar over your own son. You threw me away like I was nothing, and now you want me to just forgive and forget because you finally figured out the truth? I told him about the years of therapy, the trust issues, the complete destruction of my faith in family loyalty. I explained how I'd built a new life with people who actually cared about me, and how his sudden appearance had disrupted the peace I'd worked so hard to achieve. I talked about the nightmares I'd had for years, wondering if I really was the monster they thought I was. I'm sorry, he said, and he was crying now. I'm sorry for everything. We were terrible parents, and you deserved so much better. Your apology is too late, I said. I have a family now that chooses me every day, that believes in me, that would never throw me away for someone else's lies. You can take your guilt and your apologies and go back to whatever's left of the family you chose to protect. I walked him to the door and told him not to contact me again. He handed me a piece of paper with Kai's phone number on it, said Kai wanted to apologize too, and had been hoping to reconnect. I threw it in the trash without looking at it, making sure he saw me do it. After he left, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally, completely free. The truth was out, my family knew they'd been wrong, and I didn't care anymore. I had everything I needed right here in this house with my wife and kids, and the family that chose to love me. April came downstairs after putting the kids to bed and found me sitting there. Are you okay? How do you feel? She asked, sitting next to me and taking my hand. Like I can finally close that chapter, I said. They know the truth now, and it doesn't change anything. This is my family. You guys are my family, and that's enough. Jensen called later that night to check on me. Apparently, my father had contacted him to get my address, and Jensen had been debating whether to warn me or not. I told him what my father had said, and Jensen just laughed. Took them long enough to figure it out. he said. Too bad they lost you in the process. Their loss, I said. And for the first time in 7 years, I really meant it. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I'm going to reconnect with Kai. The answer is no. He had 8 years to figure out the truth, or at least question Anita's story. Instead, he married her and lived happily ever after, while I rebuilt my life from nothing. Some bridges burn completely, and that's okay. Edit 2. For those asking about my kids, they know I'm from the States and that I have family there I don't talk to. When they're older, I'll tell them the whole story. Right now, they're just happy kids with parents who love them and grandparents who spoil them rotten. That's how I want to keep it. Story 4. My fiancée said, I need space, don't disturb me. Then posted pics with her ex. So I gave her what she wanted. Canceled the wedding, changed the locks, sold the car. 10 days later, she came back panicking. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Alright, Reddit. I was engaged until my fiancé suddenly hit me with, I need space. I respected her wishes. A few days later, her friend sent me screenshots, and there she was, vacationing with her ex. I didn't say a word. I got to work. By the time she came back, her key didn't work. Her car was gone, and so was her place in my life. Here's how it went down. Let me start from the beginning. I, 29 male, own a custom motorcycle shop in Phoenix. Decent money, nothing crazy but enough to live comfortably in Arizona. Been grinding since I was 20. Finally got the shop fully established last year after busting my ass 60+ hours a week for years. Started with just me in a tiny garage space I rented from an old mechanic who was retiring. Now I've got 4 full-time employees and a reputation for some of the cleanest custom work in the Southwest. The shop wasn't handed to me on a silver platter either. I saved every dollar I made working at other shops, took night classes on business management, and lived in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox for 3 years to build my capital. There's something deeply satisfying about walking into my shop every morning, knowing every bolt, every tool, every square inch is there because I earned it. Never been the type to splurge on fancy shit. My dad watched his brother lose everything in a nasty divorce back in the 90s. House, retirement savings, even had to liquidate his small business to pay the settlement. Dad drilled financial responsibility into my head from day one. Luke, build your own safety net because nobody else will. That advice turned out to be a lifesaver. I remember when I bought my first proper tool set. Dad came over to my apartment, saw me organizing these brand new Snap-on wrenches, and just nodded. Good investment. Tools make money. Toys cost money. Then he helped me build a custom storage solution for them using scrap wood from his garage. That's my dad. Practical advice followed by practical help. I bought my apartment 3 years ago when the market dipped slightly. Rest of my money goes straight to investment accounts and the shop. The only exceptions to my frugal lifestyle, my Ducati Monster, midnight black with custom exhaust that sounds like pure mechanical poetry, and my dog Max, a 3-year-old German Shepherd who's been with me since he was a puppy. I'd take him to the shop sometimes. Customers loved him, and he'd just chill by my office, occasionally greeting people with a tennis ball in his mouth. Max has been the most consistent relationship in my life. No drama, no complaints about working late, just pure loyalty. The kind of companion who's equally happy going for a mountain run or just lying at your feet while you work on engine blueprints. My fiancée Stacy, 27 female, and I had been together for 2 years, engaged for the last 6 months. Wedding planned for this fall, already put down deposits on venue, catering, the works. She moved into my apartment after the first year. Things seemed good on the surface. She had her career, I had mine with the shop. We had the whole future mapped out. Meeting Stacy was one of those things that seemed like fate at the time. Friend of a friend introduced us at a housewarming party. She was gorgeous. Blonde hair, always perfectly styled, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. Smart too, always had the right thing to say to clients, and knew how to work a room. Our first few dates were perfect. She seemed interested in my business, asked all the right questions, and laughed at my jokes. Thinking now how there were some red flags I ignored. She'd make comments about my friends being too basic because they liked sports and gaming. Called my best friend Tristan's apartment a man cave nightmare, just because he had gaming consoles and a big TV. Tristan never liked her much, said she had princess vibes, and was always watching how she acted differently around certain people. Notice how she talks to that waiter, versus how she talks to your landlord, he'd point out. Two different people. I brushed it off as her being socially adaptable. That's what we do as guys sometimes. We see what we want to see. When a woman who looks like she could be on a magazine cover shows interest, we ignore the warning signs. Basic male programming error. But I ignored all that because I thought we were solid. The sex was great. She looked amazing on my arm at industry events, and I thought I'd found someone who respected my grind. When she hinted about marriage, I thought, why not? I was established, ready to start the next chapter. It was a random evening in May. I was prepping dinner. Yeah, I did most of the cooking even after working all day at the shop, while she was too tired from sitting at a desk. When my phone buzzed with a text, Luke, things feel complicated. I'm stressing over the wedding, and I really need some space to think and figure things out. Don't contact me for a while, please. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Gut punch doesn't begin to describe it. 6 months from our wedding and she needs space? No warning, no conversation, just a text asking me to effectively disappear while she figured things out. But fine, I tried to be understanding. Texted back, okay, I understand. Take the time you need. Then nothing. Radio silence, which is what she asked for. I spent the next couple days in a fog. Couldn't focus at work. Was trying to finish a custom seat for a 72 Triumph when Tristan stopped by the shop. He watched me sand the leather for like 20 minutes before saying, dude, that seat was done half an hour ago. You're just going through the motions. He was right. I put down the tools. Closed the shop early for the first time in months. Tristan came over Thursday night with pizza, told me bluntly, dude, this isn't normal. Nobody asks for space 6 months before their wedding unless they're doing shady shit. I defended her at first. Maybe she's really just stressed about the wedding. Her mom's been putting a lot of pressure on her about the guest list. Even to my own ears, it sounded weak. Tristan just gave me that look, the one that says, you're smarter than this, without having to speak the words. He'd been my friend since high school, seen me through my mom's death, helped me move shop locations twice, never asked for anything in return. The kind of friend who shows up with tools when you mention a project, not excuses when you need help. Then Friday night, I got a text from Stacy's friend, Melissa. She's one of Stacy's coworkers who I'd always gotten along with. Luke, I think you should see this. I feel bad showing you, but you deserve to know. Attached was a screenshot from Stacy's Instagram close friends story that Melissa was part of. Pictures of bright sunshine, beach cocktails, Stacy looking ridiculously happy arm in arm with Jordan, her ex-boyfriend. Caption was, living our best lives. Island getaway reunited. Sometimes you need to revisit the past to see your future clearly. My blood ran cold. Space to think meant a tropical vacation with her ex-boyfriend while explicitly asking me for no contact. And she was dumb enough to post it on her close friends story, forgetting Melissa and I were friendly. I called Melissa for details. Turns out Stacy had told everyone at work she was taking vacation days for a family emergency. Apparently the emergency involved bikinis, pina coladas, and her ex-boyfriend's tongue down her throat in several other photos Melissa sent me. The hurt morphed into something else. A cold, hard clarity. She didn't just want space. She wanted me out of the way while she test drove her old relationship, keeping me as a backup plan in my own apartment, using my resources while telling me to leave her alone, all while our wedding venues had my deposits and her engagement ring sat on her finger in those beach photos. Fine. Saturday morning, I went into tactical mode. First call, wedding venue. Canceled. Lost the $5,000 deposit, but whatever. Cheaper than divorce. Second call, caterer. Another $2,000 gone. Photographer. Florist. DJ. One by one, I methodically erased the wedding she'd spent months planning. Next call, locksmith. Had the deadbolt and knob lock on my apartment door changed. Cost about $250. Worth every penny. I spent the next hour going through paperwork, documenting everything I'd paid for versus what she had. The reality was sobering. My contribution had been about 80% of our shared expenses. Next, the ring. Stacy had conveniently left it on her nightstand before leaving. Probably didn't want tan lines in her beach pics with Jordan. 3-carat diamond that cost me nearly $15,000. I put it in my safe along with the documentation showing I had purchased it. In Arizona, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts. The car requires context. About 6 months ago, Stacy's old Honda finally died. Timing belt went, bent the valves. Would have cost more to fix than the car was worth. She needed reliable transportation for client meetings. But her credit was trash after maxing out credit cards on designer bags and those $300 face creams. I agreed to help. I bought a used but very decent Mazda 6 for about $18,000. The loan, title, and insurance are all solely in my name. I'm not stupid. My dad's brother made that mistake. Let his ex-wife drive a car he was paying for during their separation. She totaled it, wasn't properly insured, and he still had to pay off the loan while being sued by the other driver. Not happening to me. I called my dad that night, needed his perspective. Dad, Stacy asked for space, then went to Hawaii with her ex. I'm changing the locks and selling her car. Dead silence for a moment. Then, son, your Uncle Dave lost his house over less. You're doing what needs doing. Then he cleared his throat. Need help moving furniture? The understanding was she'd make payments to me, which she did, sometimes late. And it was her car to use, but legally it was 100% mine. Never added her to anything. I took the spare key, drove it to a dealership that buys used cars. Explained I'm the registered owner, need to sell. They offered around $16,500 pending inspection. I signed the initial paperwork and left the car there. Her designated parking spot at the apartment complex. Empty. The manager at the dealership raised an eyebrow when I explained I was selling my fiance's car. I just shrugged and said, she wanted space. I'm giving her about 16,500 square feet of it. Called Tristan to pick me up. He was impressed. Damn, you're ice cold right now. But she deserves it. We spent the weekend boxing up her stuff from the apartment. Not throwing it out, just getting it ready. Every designer shoe, I counted 37 pairs, every overpriced handbag, every piece of jewelry I'd given her for birthdays and anniversaries, all carefully packed away. Found some interesting things during the process. Credit card statements showing thousands in debt she'd never mentioned. A hidden stash of emergency cash, about $800, taped to the back of her dresser. A journal where she'd written pros and cons lists about me versus Jordan dated 3 months ago. My name had financial stability and good future father in the pros column. Jordan had exciting, passionate, and history together on his side. Guess which way she was leaning based on her current location. Also had a meeting with my lawyer. Shared the screenshots. Explained the situation. Asked about protecting myself. Arizona is not a common law marriage state, so at least there was that. We'd never merged finances, my apartment was solely in my name, and the car was legally mine. He advised documenting everything, the engagement termination, the car sale, the items in the apartment, told me to communicate only in writing going forward. I felt calm, like performing necessary surgery. Did I feel like a complete idiot? Absolutely. But emotions weren't driving this bus. Logic was. She asked for space and no contact. She demonstrated the relationship was over by vacationing with her ex. I was simply respecting her request and protecting myself. The shop was quiet that weekend. I went in anyway, just to have somewhere to be. Started reorganizing the tool room, deep cleaning equipment, updating our inventory system. All those things that get pushed aside during busy weeks. There's something therapeutic about bringing order to a space when your personal life is in chaos. Diego, my head mechanic, came in for a few hours to help with a rush job. Didn't ask why I was there on a Sunday, just handed me tools when I needed them. That's what I appreciate about the guys at the shop. They understand that sometimes you need to work with your hands to process what's happening in your head. According to Instagram, the best life vacation lasted another week. The countdown to meltdown was on. One small mercy in all this, at least my Ducati was safe. Stacy had always complained about it being too dangerous and a waste of money, but I'd stood firm on keeping it. When Tristan picked me up from the dealership, he looked at me and said, "Bike ride this weekend? You need it." He was right. She'd actually tried to get me to sell the Ducati about 6 months into our relationship. We could use that money for a down payment on a bigger place, she'd suggested. Never mind that I already owned my apartment and had no interest in taking on more debt for a bigger place we didn't need. The Ducati stayed, and now I was grateful for that small victory. Sunday morning, we took our bikes up through the mountains. Tristan on his Kawasaki, me on the Ducati. The focus required to handle those curves at speed was exactly what I needed. Impossible to think about relationship drama when you're calculating lean angles and watching for gravel. The one part I did feel guilty about was Max. Stacy had technically agreed to our dog, but she'd never really taken care of him. She'd complained about his fur, his energy, the cost of his food. Still, he'd be confused when she didn't come back. Turns out I didn't need to worry. Max seemed happier with just me there, claiming the whole couch without being shooed off. Stacy's tropical getaway with Jordan lasted a total of 10 days. Then D-Day arrived. Tuesday evening around 9 p.m. I was having a beer with Tristan, who insisted on being there, in case shit gets wild. We heard keys jangling outside, then confused scraping at the lock, then pounding. "Luke, Open the door! My key isn't working! Tristan glanced at me. Showtime! I opened the door halfway. Stacy stood there looking beach-tanned and furious, suitcase beside her. What the hell? Why isn't my key working? Because I changed the locks. My voice was steady. Her eyes widened. You what? Why would you do that? You asked for space and no contact, Stacy. I gave it to you. Permanently. Weddings canceled too. Already called everyone. What are you talking about? I just needed some time to think. I pulled out my phone. Showed her the screenshot Melissa sent me. Think about this? With Jordan? On your romantic beach getaway that you posted about? Her face went from angry to panic-stricken in a millisecond. That was just... Melissa showed you that? That betch! It's not what it looks like. Looks like my fiancé on vacation with her ex while I'm home planning our wedding. Pretty self-explanatory. It was a last-minute thing. He was going through a hard time and needed someone to talk to. Tristan snorted from behind me. I just stared at her. So you flew to Maui to be his therapist? Her eyes darted to the empty parking spot. Where's my car, Luke? The entitlement in her voice was unreal, like I'd hidden her toy. It's not your car. Never was. It's being sold. Title, loan, insurance, all in my name. You're selling my car? She actually stomped her foot. You can't do that. I've been making payments. Payments for using my car, which is now over. This is insane. I'm calling the cops. She pulled out her phone. Tristan, who'd been watching, started laughing. Yeah, call them. Tell them your ex-fiancé is selling his own car and changed the locks on his own apartment after you cheated. That'll go well. Stacy looked like she'd just noticed him. This isn't your business, Tristan. Made it my business when you decided to mess around on my best friend. She turned back to me. Luke, baby, you're overreacting. Jordan means nothing to me. It was just a stupid trip to clear my head. I realized I want to be with you. I almost laughed. Save the performance. Your stuff is boxed up. Text me when you want to pick it up. That's when her sister Brooke, 25 female, appeared from the elevator. Great. Reinforcements. Brooke was Stacy's mini-me. Same entitled attitude, same expensive taste, same tendency to treat service workers like furniture. The only difference was Brooke hadn't found her own sucker to bankroll her lifestyle yet. What's going on? She demanded. Stacy, full waterworks now. He changed the locks. He sold my car. He canceled our wedding. Brooke glared at me like I'd committed war crimes. After everything my sister has done for you, you just throw her out? Tristan snorted. What exactly has she done for him besides taking a beach vacation with her ex? I held up a hand, cutting off the brewing argument. Check her Instagram. We're done. From inside the apartment, Max started barking at all the commotion. Stacy's eyes widened. Are you keeping Max too? The audacity was breathtaking. The dog whose name you couldn't remember half the time? That dog? She needed space to think, not for you to ruin her life. Brooke was practically screaming. She made choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Your stuff will be in the lobby tomorrow at noon. 1 hour window. If it's not picked up, it goes to Goodwill. I shut the door and locked it. Through the door, I could hear Stacy's meltdown intensifying. Tristan just shook his head. Dude, bullet dodged. Want another drink? Max, who'd been anxiously watching the door, came over and put his head on my knee. I scratched behind his ears. It's just us now, buddy. Tristan raised his bottle. To the most expensive lesson you'll ever learn. I clinked my bottle against his. Worth every penny. Later that night, after Tristan left, I sat on my balcony looking at the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. No more explaining why I needed to work late at the shop. No more defending time with my friends. I sent a quick text to my dad. It's done. Locks changed, car sold, wedding canceled. His response came a minute later. Proud of you, son. Come by for steaks this weekend. Bring Max. Your mom would have kicked her ass, by the way. That made me smile. Mom had been gone for 6 years. But Dad was right. She'd have seen through Stacy in a heartbeat. The next day was like watching someone realize gravity exists after stepping off a cliff. Stacy's text started at 6 a.m. You can't do this to me. Where am I supposed to live? I need my car for work. We need to talk about this like adults. I made a mistake, but you're being cruel. I didn't respond to any of them. Tristan and I loaded up her boxes and brought them to the lobby at noon sharp. I'd even organized everything by category. The kind of courtesy she didn't deserve, but I provided anyway because I'm not an animal. Stacy showed up with Brooke and their mom, Cheryl, in tow. Cheryl, the source of Stacy's entitlement, immediately launched into me. Luke, this is completely unacceptable behavior. Stacy made one mistake. She was confused. She's under so much pressure with the wedding. Not anymore, she's not. I gestured to the boxes. Everything's here. You have 1 hour. My daughter lived there for a year. Without being on the lease, without paying rent, driving a car she didn't own. Seems like the free ride is over. Cheryl's face turned purple. Stacy was alternating between crying and glaring daggers at me. Brooke was on her phone, probably updating the rest of the family drama group chat. I left them to it. Told the doorman they had until 1 p.m., then went for lunch with Tristan. When we came back, they were gone, along with her stuff. Mission accomplished. But it didn't end there. The texts and calls multiplied. Stacy, Brooke, Cheryl, even their dad got in on it. When blocking their numbers didn't work, they started using friends' phones. The narrative they were spinning was something else. According to them, I had brutally discarded Stacy over one misunderstanding, stolen her car, and kept her apartment. No mention of the beach vacation with the ex, of course. Stacy's social media went into overdrive. Vague posts about trusting the wrong person and healing from betrayal. A particularly dramatic one showed her staring wistfully out a window with the caption, "Sometimes the people you'd take a bullet for are the ones behind the trigger." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then our mutual friend started hitting me up. "Dude, that's cold. Selling her car like that. Man, couldn't you have given her more time to find a place?" Melissa, bless her, was shutting that shit down wherever she could. "He has screenshots, people. She was on a romantic trip with her ex while engaged." Stacy must have figured out Melissa sent me the screenshots because soon Melissa was texting me. She got me fired. Told our boss I was creating a hostile work environment by meddling in her personal life. A just FYI. That pissed me off more than anything else. Melissa had done the right thing, and Stacy destroyed her job out of spite. I immediately called Melissa, offered to help her with references, connections, whatever she needed. It was the least I could do. Melissa thanked me. I knew she was self-centered, but I didn't think she'd go this far. I promised to put her in touch with some industry contacts who might be hiring. She had skills. Stacy's vindictiveness shouldn't derail her career. That night, Tristan came over for our weekly gaming session. We fired up Call of Duty while Max lounged at our feet. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Stacy using yet another friend's number. Tristan grabbed my phone between rounds and started reading them in a high-pitched, mocking voice. "You're making a huge mistake, Luke. I was confused, but I chose you. Please respond." Tristan scrolled to the next one, adding dramatic flair. "My mother is very disappointed in you and says you're behaving childishly." I clutched my chest in fake horror. "Guess I'll just cry myself to sleep on my Ducati." Tristan read another. "I hope you know you're breaking my heart. I cried all night thinking about our wedding." Tristan nearly choked on his drink. "Oh my God, she's seriously complaining about her vacation time. After cheating on you." My phone buzzed again. Tristan looked at it and burst out laughing. "Dude, she just texted, 'I miss Max. He misses me too. Dogs need a mother.'" I glanced at Max, who was contentedly chewing his favorite toy, completely unbothered. Yeah, he's clearly devastated. Look at him, practically wasting away from grief. Tristan was still scrolling through my messages. Wait, here's one from her dad. "Luke, I've always respected you as a businessman, but your behavior towards my daughter is unacceptable. We expect you to make this right." Tristan looked up at me. "What exactly does make this right mean? Give her back the car you paid for? Let her live in your apartment rent-free?" I shrugged. "Probably all of the above, plus a groveling apology for having the audacity to be upset about her cheating." The whole situation was so absurd, it had crossed into comedy. Stacy and her family lived in a world where actions didn't have consequences. At least not for them. In their version of reality, I was the villain for responding logically to her betrayal. At work, I focused on a new project, a vintage Honda CB750 that a client had dropped off for a complete restoration. There's something therapeutic about tearing down an engine to its individual components, cleaning each part, and building it back up better than before. The shop became my sanctuary, a place where problems had logical solutions and every task had a clear beginning and end. My employees noticed the change in me. Diego, my head mechanic, finally asked what was up after I spent 3 straight hours reconfiguring a wiring harness without taking a break. I gave him the highlight reel. His response was perfect. A slow nod, then, "Women, man." My cousin went through the same thing. "You want me to order those brake calipers for the Triumph while you finish that wiring?" That's what I needed. Practical solutions, not drama. The shop stayed open late that week as I threw myself into work. Nothing cures heartbreak like productivity and a bank account that's growing instead of bleeding money on someone else's desires. Dad stopped by the shop on Thursday with lunch, a tradition he'd started when I first opened the place. He'd bring sandwiches from this little deli near his house, and we'd eat in my office, talking about everything and nothing. How you holding up? He asked between bites. Better than expected, I admitted. Work helps. He nodded. Your Uncle Dave gained 15 pounds after his divorce. Sat around eating microwave burritos and watching game shows. He looked at me. You're doing it right. Stay busy. Keep moving forward. Simple advice, but exactly what I needed to hear. 2 weeks after the return, the real harassment campaign started. First came the police. I got home from work to find a patrol car outside my building. Two officers wanted to talk about a domestic dispute and allegations I was withholding personal property. I showed them the documentation my lawyer had prepared, proof of car ownership, apartment lease in my name only, canceled wedding receipts. Showed them the screenshot of Stacy with Jordan, explained I had given her all her possessions. They left satisfied this was a relationship issue, not a legal one. One officer actually gave me a knowing look as they were leaving. Document everything from here on out, he advised quietly. These situations tend to escalate. Words of wisdom from someone who'd seen this play out before. Next day, call from my landlord about a noise complaint. Apparently, an anonymous neighbor reported loud arguments and possible domestic disturbances. I explained the situation, thankfully had a good relationship with the property manager. She admitted she'd seen Stacy trying to tailgate residents into the building several times, against policy. Then things escalated. Stacy and Brooke started showing up at my workplace, just happening to be in the lobby when I was leaving. Once, Stacy tried to force her way into the elevator with me, screaming about how I'd ruined her life. Diego and the guys formed a protective barrier when they saw what was happening. Boss, want us to call security? Diego asked, positioning himself between Stacy and me. I nodded, and they escorted the sisters out. My team had my back, no questions asked. This was getting out of control. I filed a police report documenting the harassment, started recording every interaction, saved every text and voicemail, installed a security camera at my apartment door, connected to my phone, gave the front desk a photo of Stacy and instructions not to let her up under any circumstances. The breaking point came when I woke up to find my car's tires slashed. Security cameras caught Brooke doing it at 3 a.m. The footage was crystal clear, her face clearly visible as she knelt by each tire, methodically puncturing them with what looked like a hunting knife. Police were called. Charges filed. The incident report put the damage at over $800. All 4 tires were high-performance ones I'd upgraded to last year. Thankfully, my insurance covered it after the deductible, but the hassle of getting the car towed and fixed was a major inconvenience. I was paranoid about the Ducati after that. Started parking it in a secure garage a block away, just in case. No way I was letting them get to my baby. That bike represented the reward for years of hard work. If they damaged it, I'm not sure I could have maintained my composure. That same day, I got an email from Jordan, of all people. Man, I'm sorry about all this. She told me you two were already over before our trip. I didn't know you were still engaged. She's been showing up at my place too. Just thought you should know. Turns out Stacy had fed him a complete fiction, that we'd broken up weeks before, that I was possessive, and wouldn't accept it was over. When he found out the truth from mutual friends, he ended things immediately. Now she was showing up at his apartment unannounced, crying, demanding another chance. Bullet dodged, brother, he said before hanging up. Couldn't argue with that. Later, I found out Stacy had been spreading rumors that I was abusive, that I controlled her finances, that I'd trapped her in the relationship. Classic Darvo. She was casting herself as the victim of a controlling monster, rather than a woman who got caught cheating and lost her meal ticket. The problem with her narrative, too many people had seen the reality. My neighbors had seen me walking Max alone every night while she was inside watching Netflix. My employees had seen her showing up demanding money when her credit cards were maxed out. Our friends had seen how she treated service staff when she thought no one important was watching. Through it all, Tristan and Melissa were solid. Tristan even let Stacy know, through a mutual friend, that I was documenting everything for a restraining order. Melissa, despite losing her job, sent me additional screenshots of Stacy bragging about the beach trip to friends before she left. Luke thinks I'm just taking time to think, lol. Meanwhile, Jordan and I will be living it up in paradise. The screenshots had timestamps, dates, the whole 9 yards. Undeniable evidence of premeditated deception. I added it all to the growing file my lawyer was keeping. I called my dad after the tire slashing incident. They're escalating, I told him. Slashed my tires, showing up at work, spreading rumors? Makes sense, he said, surprisingly calm. How does any of this make sense? Son, you took away her free ride. People don't give up resources without a fight. Your uncle's ex-wife did the same. Keyed his truck, told the neighbors he was cheating. It's what happens when the gravy train stops rolling. He paused, then added, Got your security cameras set up like I showed you? Yes, sir. Caught her sister on video with the knife. Good man. I filed for the restraining order. Had a mountain of evidence. The workplace incidents, the slashed tires, the constant harassment, the false police reports, dozens of messages from different numbers after being blocked. The hearing was scheduled. I was ready. The restraining order hearing was like watching a live-action version of the surprised Pikachu meme. Stacy showed up with Cheryl, both dressed like they were going to church, probably expecting sympathy from the judge. I showed up with my lawyer and a binder full of evidence. Stacy's strategy became clear quickly. Play the devastated, confused young woman who made one mistake and was now being punished excessively by a controlling ex. It might have worked if we didn't have the receipts. My lawyer methodically laid out the pattern of harassment. The judge flipped through the evidence with an increasingly stern expression. The judge granted the restraining order immediately. 3 years, no contact within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. That should have been the end. But Stacy's family had one more card to play. The desperation card. About a month after the hearing, Cheryl called. The family was in financial distress. Stacy couldn't hold a job without transportation. Brooke had legal bills from the vandalism charge. They needed help. Could I please reconsider selling Stacy her car back to her? Maybe loan them some money to get back on their feet? I laughed so hard. The absolute audacity. These people had tried to destroy my reputation, career, and property, and now wanted financial assistance? Cheryl, I said calmly, Stacy and Brooke are both in violation of the restraining order by having you contact me. I'm forwarding this call to my lawyer and the police. Don't call again. Later found out through the grapevine what happened next. Stacy had been fired from her job. Turns out repeatedly missing work because you don't have a car doesn't fly professionally. The beach trip had maxed out her credit cards. She'd been crashing with her parents, but had succeeded in driving a wedge into their marriage with her constant demands. Jordan? Long gone. He blocked Stacy after she showed up drunk at his apartment one too many times. Brooke had community service for the tire slashing, plus had to pay restitution. As for me, I sold the engagement ring and took a 2-week vacation to Europe. Solo. Posted exactly 0 photos online. When I got back, I painted the whole apartment, bought new furniture, and reclaimed my space. The place looked better than ever. Now it's a clean, functional space where a man and his dog could live in peace. Tristan and I meet weekly, and he's actually hitting it off with Melissa now, which is an unexpected silver lining. They've been dating for about a month. Sometimes the 4 of us, counting Max, hang out at my place for game nights. It's nice seeing 2 people who actually treat each other with respect. The shop was thriving too. After that first week of fog, I'd thrown myself into a big custom project, transforming a beat-up Harley Sportster into something special. Stripped it down to the frame, rebuilt the engine with performance parts, custom paint job with subtle metal flake that changed color depending on the light. Tristan had come by during the final assembly and whistled when he saw it. Man, you really outdid yourself on this one. The tank paint alone is worth whatever you're charging. The client who commissioned it was so impressed, he referred 3 friends, all wanting similar work. Word of mouth in the motorcycle community is better than any advertising you could pay for. Diego and the crew had really stepped up during the whole Stacy drama too. There were days when I wasn't at my best, and they picked up the slack without complaint. When the Sportster project got featured in a motorcycle magazine, I made sure they all got credit and bonuses. A good team is worth their weight in gold. About 3 months after the restraining order, I was at a motorcycle show in Las Vegas, displaying one of my custom builds. A woman came up and started asking detailed questions about the fabrication work, not the usual "it's pretty" comments, but specific technical questions that showed she knew her stuff. Sarah, 28 female, turned out to be an industrial designer who wrote a Triumph Street Triple. We exchanged numbers professionally, but ended up texting about bikes, then other things. We've been dating casually for a couple months now. She has her own career, her own apartment, her own money. She scratches Max behind the ears exactly where he likes it. The first time Sarah came over, Max immediately brought her his favorite toy, something he'd never done with Stacy. Dogs know quality people when they meet them. Sarah came to Sunday lunch at my dad's house last week. They spent 2 hours talking about motorcycle engine design while I grilled steaks. Dad texted me later. She knows her stuff. Smart pick, son. High praise from a man who's suspicious of everyone by default. I learned more about myself in those few months than in the previous decade. Learned I'm stronger than I thought, that I have people in my corner who'll show up when needed, and that sometimes the best thing you can do with toxic people is cut them out completely. These days, I'm too busy building bikes and building a better life to dwell on what might have been. Some lessons are expensive, but man, are they worth it. Story 5. Parents evicted me, so I secretly bought their house and tripled the rent. All right, so here's how things started going downhill, or maybe uphill, depending on how you look at it. I was 22, trying to get my degree and working part-time at this crappy little grocery store that paid me peanuts. My parents, Tom and Linda, were always breathing down my neck, acting like my life belonged to them. They had this perfect picture in their heads of how my life should turn out, and they weren't shy about pushing me towards it every single day. They thought they knew better, but man, did they have no clue what I actually wanted. So one night, we're sitting at the dinner table, just a regular Thursday night or something, and I'm trying to quietly eat this overcooked meatloaf my mom made. It was like chewing cardboard, but I wasn't about to say anything because they'd find a way to turn that into a lecture on how ungrateful I am. Anyway, out of nowhere, my dad, with his usual fake, concerned dad voice, goes, "How's that business degree going?" Now, I knew this conversation was going to come up eventually, but I wasn't ready for it. My heart started racing and I could feel my stomach drop, but I had to rip off the Band-Aid. I put my fork down, staring at the pile of peas I'd been pushing around my plate like a 5-year-old. About that, I started, my voice a little shaky. I've been thinking about switching majors. The room went silent. Like, you could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, and that's when I knew I was in for it. Switching majors? My dad practically spits his food out. His face turned this weird shade of red that only ever happens when he's seriously pissed off. Yeah, I want to switch to computer science, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I felt like I was standing in front of a firing squad, though. Before I could even finish, my mom jumped in with her usual condescending tone. Jake, thinking's never been your strong suit, she said with this tight smile like she was making a joke. But we all knew she wasn't. That's how she gets her digs in, always wrapped in a fake laugh or a so-called joke. I just sat there, swallowing the anger that was bubbling up inside me. I wanted to yell at them, tell them they were wrong, but I knew better. That'd just lead to more yelling, and I wasn't in the mood for a full-blown argument. But my dad wasn't done yet. He slammed his fork down on the table so hard it made the plates rattle. Computer science? Are you out of your damn mind? Business is what's going to make you money. You're throwing away your future on some stupid hobby. I tried to explain. It's not a hobby, Dad. I'm really into it, and I think I could be good at it. You think? He cut me off again. Passion doesn't pay the bills, Jake. You're being reckless. You need to think about your future, not just whatever you feel like doing right now. My mom nodded along, of course, adding fuel to the fire. You're not a child anymore. You don't just get to play around with your future. That's when it hit me. They didn't care about what I wanted, not one bit. To them, I was just this project they were working on, and any deviation from their grand plan meant I was screwing everything up. They didn't even stop to consider that maybe, just maybe, I knew what was best for me. After dinner, I went up to my room, slammed the door shut, and collapsed on my bed. I felt like a weight was pressing down on my chest. I pulled out my phone and called Ashley. She was the only person who got it, who understood what I was going through. How'd it go? She asked, knowing damn well how it went. Like a freaking disaster, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. They totally freaked out when I told them. It was like I'd just told them I was dropping out to join a circus or something. She sighed on the other end of the line. Jake, you've got to stand up for yourself. This is your life, not theirs. You don't owe them anything. I know, but they're my parents, you know? It's not that easy. I get it, she said softly. But you're 22, Jake. You're not a kid anymore. You've got to start living your own life or they're going to keep running it for you. I sat there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she said. She was right. I was an adult now, and it was about time I started acting like one. The next day, I woke up feeling a mix of dread and determination. I had to tell them, for real this time. I couldn't just keep letting them decide my life for me. So I walked downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, and found them sitting in the living room, watching TV. Mom, Dad, we need to talk, I said, my voice shaky but firm enough. My dad muted the TV, and they both looked at me like they were expecting some big announcement. And in a way, I guess it was. I've made my decision. I'm switching to computer science. My dad's eyes narrowed. No, you're not. I stood my ground this time. Yes, I am. I'm an adult, and this is my choice. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd back off and let me have this one. But then, Mom stood up, crossing her arms over her chest. If you're such an adult, then you can support yourself, she said, her voice cold. You've got 24 hours to pack your things and get out. I just stood there, frozen, like my brain couldn't quite process what she was saying. What? I finally managed to say. You can't be serious. Oh, we're serious, my dad growled. You want to make your own decisions? Fine. But you're doing it on your own. I don't even remember walking back to my room. I just remember the overwhelming feeling of betrayal, like they'd been waiting for an excuse to kick me out all along. I was their kid, their son, and they were just tossing me out like I meant nothing. I called Mike, my best friend, the second I got back to my room. I didn't even bother to keep my voice steady anymore. Dude, they kicked me out, I said, my hands shaking. I don't know what to do. Without missing a beat, Mike replied, Pack your stuff, man, you're staying with me. As I threw my clothes into a duffel bag, it finally hit me. I was homeless. My own parents had thrown me out like I was garbage. But at the same time, as messed up as it sounds, a part of me felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be under their control anymore. I was free, but I had no idea what that really meant yet. The next few days after getting kicked out were a complete blur. I was crashing at Mike's apartment, trying to get my head straight, but it felt like everything in my life had just been flipped upside down. I mean, one minute I'm arguing with my parents over my major, and the next, I'm homeless. It didn't even feel real, like it was happening to someone else, not me. Mike's place was fine. He lived in this tiny one-bedroom apartment that smelled like old pizza and gym socks, but I couldn't really complain. I had a roof over my head and a friend who wasn't about to ask me to leave. But man, it was cramped. I was sleeping on his ratty old couch that squeaked every time I moved. I didn't have a choice, though. I wasn't about to go crawling back to my parents and beg them to take me in. That wasn't happening. I tried to focus on my classes, but it was almost impossible. Every time I sat down to do my assignments, my brain would just drift off, thinking about what happened. It was like my mind wouldn't let me forget for even a second that I didn't have a real home anymore. And then, of course, there was the money problem. My savings were already draining fast, and I didn't have enough to make it long if I wasn't working more hours. But with classes and trying to figure out where my life was going, it wasn't like I could just pick up a second job. Ashley kept trying to be supportive, but even she couldn't fix the mess I was in. I remember one day she called me up, telling me we should go get lunch, try to take my mind off things for a bit. We ended up at this cheap sandwich shop down the street from Mike's place. I hadn't been eating much since I left home, so I figured it might help to get out for a bit. So, how are you holding up? She asked, biting into her sandwich. I shrugged. Honestly, not great. I can't focus on school and my money's running out fast. I don't know how long I can keep this up. She gave me that sympathetic look, the one I'd been getting from pretty much everyone since I told them what happened. You're doing the best you can, Jake. This isn't the end of the world, okay? It's just a bump in the road. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Yeah, a bump the size of a mountain. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. You'll figure this out. I know you will. You've always been smart, even if your parents don't see it. Her words were nice, but they didn't change the fact that I was stuck in a situation I didn't know how to get out of. It felt like no matter what I did, I was just treading water, trying not to drown. After lunch, I headed back to Mike's and tried to focus on my assignments. But the more I stared at the computer screen, the more I realized I was falling behind. My grades were slipping, and the thought of dropping out was creeping into my mind more and more. I didn't want to do it, but it felt like I was running out of options. I couldn't juggle everything. I was barely keeping my head above water as it was. A few weeks passed, and things didn't get any better. My savings hit rock bottom, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I had to make a decision. Mike could only cover for me so much, and I wasn't going to keep freeloading off him forever. The day I dropped out of college was one of the worst days of my life. It felt like I was admitting defeat, like I was giving up on everything I'd worked for. I remember sitting in the dean's office, signing the paperwork, and feeling like a complete failure. I'd always thought I'd be the first person in my family to finish college, but now that dream was slipping away, just like everything else. As soon as I walked out of that office, it hit me hard. I was on my own, with no degree, no solid plan, and barely any money. That night, I sat on Mike's couch staring at my phone, wondering what I was going to do. Ashley called, as she always did, checking in on me. So, what's the plan now? She asked softly. I don't know, I admitted. I'm looking for more work, but nothing's coming through. It's like every door is closing in my face. There was a pause on the other end, and I could tell she was trying to come up with something to say, something that would make me feel better. You're not giving up, right? I don't have a choice, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I dropped out today. Oh, Jake, she whispered. I'm sorry, but this isn't the end. You'll find something, I know you will. I wanted to believe her, but it was getting harder to stay hopeful. I spent the next few days pounding the pavement, applying to every job I could find, but nothing stuck. The only place that offered me anything was Sunnyside Diner, a greasy spoon that felt like it hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. It wasn't exactly my dream job, but it was better than nothing. They needed someone to flip burgers and mop floors, and I needed money. So I took it. The hours were brutal, and the pay was terrible, but at least I had something. I spent my days covered in grease, slapping burgers onto the grill while my manager, Earl, barked orders at me like I was in boot camp. He was a gruff, no-nonsense guy who didn't seem to care about anything but the bottom line, but at least he noticed when I worked hard. After about a month at the diner, Earl pulled me aside during a slow shift. Kid, you've got a decent work ethic. You interested in picking up some extra hours? I wiped the sweat off my forehead, trying to look interested. Yeah, sure. What's up? I got a buddy who needs a night guard at this office building downtown. Pays better than here. You in? I didn't even have to think about it. Yeah, I'm in. Just like that, I was working 2 jobs, flipping burgers by day and guarding an empty building by night. It wasn't glamorous, but at least it was something. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, and most nights I was running on fumes, barely able to keep my eyes open. But I had no other choice. I had to survive. Ashley kept sending me links to tech internships, trying to help me get back on track, but I just didn't have the time or energy to apply. My life was all about survival now. It wasn't about chasing dreams or passions anymore. It was about keeping my head above water, day by day. Every night, as I sat in that dark, empty office building, staring at the flickering lights of the city outside, I couldn't help but wonder how the hell my life had turned out like this. Just a few months ago, I had plans, dreams, and a future. Now, I was just trying to get by, one shift at a time. And the worst part was, I didn't see a way out. Working 2 jobs was hell. Straight up, no other way to describe it. The diner was greasy and chaotic, and the night shifts at that empty office building were just mind-numbing. I was running on like 4 hours of sleep, drinking energy drinks like they were water, and basically living out of a beat-up backpack that I took everywhere. But at least I had some money coming in. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. Mike didn't say it, but I think he was relieved that I could start pitching in for rent. I didn't want to be that guy, freeloading off my best friend while my life fell apart, so I made sure to hand him whatever I could. I was still crashing on his couch, but at least now I wasn't a total burden. Then, out of nowhere, things started to shift. I don't know if it was dumb luck or the universe finally giving me a break, but one day while I was flipping burgers at the diner, this guy came in for lunch. I didn't think anything of it at first, just another random customer. He looked kind of tired, like the rest of us who worked too many hours for not enough pay. After his meal, he came up to the counter to pay, and as I handed him his change, he glanced at the computer screen I had opened behind the register. I'd been working on some coding exercises during my break, just trying to stay sharp, you know? The guy raised an eyebrow. You into coding? He asked, his voice kind of casual, but curious. I nodded, trying not to seem too eager. Yeah, I've been teaching myself, hoping to make a career out of it eventually. He chuckled. Well, I might have something for you. My company's looking for entry-level IT guys. Nothing fancy, but it's a start. I blinked, not really believing what I was hearing. Wait, seriously? Yeah, he shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. Send me your resume. I'll put in a word for you. He handed me his business card, and I swear my hands were shaking as I took it. It was like this tiny shred of hope that I hadn't felt in months. That night, I didn't even care how tired I was from the double shifts. I went back to Mike's place, fired up my laptop, and worked on my resume. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I shot the guy an email before I could overthink it, then tried not to get my hopes up. A few days passed, and I didn't hear anything back. Part of me figured the guy was just being nice, and I'd never actually get a call. But then, one afternoon, as I was sitting in that boring, empty office building during my night shift, my phone buzzed. It was an email from that company. I stared at the screen for a solid minute, too scared to open it. But when I finally did, it wasn't a rejection. It was an invitation to interview. I couldn't believe it. I'd gone from flipping burgers and guarding empty buildings to maybe, just maybe, getting an actual job in IT. The interview wasn't anything fancy. I borrowed one of Mike's decent shirts and took the bus to the office. It was a small startup, nothing flashy, but it felt like a whole new world compared to where I'd been. The guy from the diner, whose name I now knew was Trevor, greeted me at the door and introduced me to his boss, Tina. Tina was tough, but fair. She asked me about my experience, and I was upfront about the fact that I didn't have a degree, but I'd been teaching myself everything I could about coding and IT. I showed her some of the small projects I'd been working on, and she didn't seem too impressed at first. But then she asked me to solve a problem right there on the spot, something technical I hadn't done before. I panicked for a second, my mind racing. But then I remembered all those late nights I'd spent teaching myself, working through coding challenges just for the hell of it. I took a deep breath and got to work, trying not to let the pressure get to me. When I was done, Tina glanced over my shoulder at the screen. She didn't say much, just nodded and looked at Trevor. "He's got potential," she said. "Let's give him a shot." I didn't even know how to react. I wanted to jump up and scream, but I just sat there trying to play it cool, even though I felt like my heart was about to explode out of my chest. I started the next week as an entry-level IT guy. It wasn't glamorous, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I wasn't flipping burgers or guarding some creepy office building at 3 a.m. I was actually doing something I loved. Tina and Trevor were patient with me, showing me the ropes, but they also pushed me to keep learning. They didn't hold my hand through everything, and that's what I needed. Nights were still rough, though. I was still juggling both jobs for a while, just to make sure I didn't screw up this opportunity. So I'd work at the startup during the day, then head straight to the diner or the office building after. Sleep was still a rare luxury, and most mornings I'd wake up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Ashley stuck with me through it all. She was my rock, always sending me job links or checking in on how things were going at the startup. I don't think I'd have made it without her. Every time I felt like I was about to fall apart, she'd remind me that I was doing this for a reason, that I was building something for myself. After a few months of grinding, I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't keep working two jobs and expect to stay sane, so I went to Earl, the diner manager, and told him I had to quit. He wasn't thrilled, but he understood. "Good luck, kid," he said, giving me one of those rare moments of sincerity. "You're a hard worker. You'll be fine." Walking out of that diner for the last time felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I still had the security job for the nights I wasn't at the startup, but at least I wasn't burning myself out as fast. As time went on, I threw myself into the IT gig with everything I had. I spent every spare minute learning new skills, taking on projects, and soaking up as much knowledge as I could. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I was trying to build something. Something real. Something that was mine. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was just chasing some pipe dream. But every time I got through a challenge or solved a problem that had stumped me for hours, I felt that spark again. That fire that had been missing for so long. And slowly, bit by bit, I started to see a future for myself again. Not the future my parents had planned for me, but one that I actually wanted. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. A few months into the new job, things started to feel different. Not in a bad way, just a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I was finally doing something I actually enjoyed, and I wasn't dragging myself out of bed just to survive another day at some dead-end job. The whole IT thing, coding, troubleshooting, yeah, it wasn't glamorous, but I liked it, and it was mine, something I had worked my butt off to get. I remember sitting at my desk one afternoon, buried in some code, when my boss, Tina, walked over. She wasn't the type to beat around the bush, which I respected. She leaned on the edge of my desk and said, "Jake, I've been watching your work these past few months. You've got potential, but you're holding back." I blinked at her, completely caught off guard. "Holding back? What do you mean?" She crossed her arms, giving me that look like she already knew the answer but wanted me to say it out loud. "You've got the skills, but you're playing it safe. I see you sticking to what you know. You're not taking risks, not pushing yourself. You're comfortable, and that's fine. But comfort doesn't get you anywhere in this business." I didn't know what to say at first. She wasn't wrong. I'd been doing the work, sure, but I wasn't exactly going above and beyond. I guess, after everything that had happened, I was just happy to be in a stable place for once, and I didn't want to screw it up. "Look," Tina continued, "you're good, Jake. But if you really want to stand out, you need to step it up. Take on projects that scare you a little. That's how you grow." I nodded, still processing what she'd said. It wasn't like I hadn't heard something similar before, but this time it hit different. This wasn't some lecture from my parents about how I was wasting my potential. This was someone who saw what I was capable of and was pushing me to be better. So, I took her advice. I started volunteering for more complex projects, stuff I wasn't entirely sure I could handle. There were definitely moments where I felt like I was in way over my head, but every time I figured something out, that feeling of accomplishment made it all worth it. One day, Tina assigned me this big project for a new client. It was way more responsibility than I'd ever had before, and part of me was freaking out. But another part of me was excited. This was the kind of challenge I needed to prove to myself that I could handle bigger things. I spent weeks working on it. Late nights, weekends, pretty much any free time I had was dedicated to making sure it went perfectly. When I finally submitted the finished project, I felt like I'd just run a marathon. I was exhausted, but in that good way, like I'd pushed myself to the limit and come out the other side stronger. A few days later, Tina pulled me into her office. I sat down, trying to keep cool, but I was nervous. What if I'd messed something up? She didn't waste any time. Jake, the client loved your work. They're moving forward with everything you suggested. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. Really? She nodded, a small smile on her face. You did good. Keep this up, and you're going to go far here. I walked out of her office feeling 10 feet tall. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I started to see a future that wasn't just about scraping by, but actually building something real. The more I threw myself into my work, the more I realized how much I'd been holding back, not just in my job, but in life. It was like this fog had lifted, and I could finally see what I was capable of if I stopped letting fear hold me back. It wasn't easy, and I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but each one taught me something, pushed me forward. Around that time, things with Ashley started to shift too. She'd always been supportive, but now she seemed proud of me in a way she hadn't before. We'd go out to dinner, and instead of me venting about my crappy jobs or money problems, I'd be talking about this new project I was working on or some cool thing I'd learned, and she'd listen, really listen, like she could see I was finally on the path I was meant to be on. One night, we were sitting on her couch after I'd just finished a particularly brutal week of work. I was exhausted, but in a good way, and she looked over at me with this smile on her face. You know, she said softly, I always knew you'd get here. Maybe not in the way you planned, but you're doing it. You're making it happen. I didn't know how to respond to that. I mean, she'd been with me through the worst of it, through the days when I didn't even know if I'd make rent or where my next paycheck was coming from. But she stuck around, never once making me feel like I wasn't enough. Hearing her say that, it hit me how lucky I was to have someone like her in my corner. Thanks, I said, my voice a little rougher than I meant it to be. I don't think I'd have made it this far without you. She laughed, shaking her head. You would have. You just needed a push. Maybe she was right, but having her there made the whole thing a lot easier to handle. Things started to pick up from there. Work got busier, but in a good way. I was taking on more responsibility, getting better at what I did, and people were starting to notice. Tina kept giving me more complex projects, and every time I finished one, I felt more confident in my abilities. And the money? Well, it was still tight, but it was getting better. I'd quit the security job finally, and while I wasn't rolling in cash, I wasn't worried about where my next meal was coming from anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt stable, like I was on solid ground again. One afternoon, Tina called me into her office again. I sat down, half expecting it to be another big project, but she had this serious look on her face, one I hadn't seen before. Jake, I want to talk to you about your future here, she said, her voice calm but direct. I raised an eyebrow, not sure where this was going. Okay. She leaned back in her chair. You've done great work these past few months, and I think you're ready for more. I want to promote you to a full-time position. For a second, I just sat there, trying to process what she'd said. Full-time. That was the dream, right? No more juggling jobs, no more scraping by. This was it. I don't even know what to say, I admitted, a grin creeping onto my face. She smiled back. Just say yes. And of course, I did. Walking out of that office, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders. All the stress, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, it all seemed worth it now. I'd made it. Maybe not in the way I'd originally planned, but I'd made it all the same. And that felt pretty damn good. Getting promoted to full-time was like stepping into a whole new world. I mean, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Not just for me, but for the people around me. I didn't have to worry about making ends meet, or whether I'd have to pick up some crappy side gig just to get by. This was it. Stability. But of course, life doesn't just magically get easy once you hit a milestone like that. Things at work got busier, like way busier. Tina wasn't kidding when she said I'd be getting more responsibilities. I was thrown into bigger projects, leading teams for the first time, and managing deadlines that felt impossible at times. There were days where I'd look at my to-do list and just think, how the hell am I going to get all this done? But I pushed through. I had to. Every day was a challenge, but it was the kind of challenge I'd been waiting for. The kind that made me feel alive. Even though I was still learning, I was finally in a place where people trusted me to get the job done. That was huge for me. One afternoon, Tina pulled me into her office, again. I swear, every time she called me in, I felt like I was back in school, waiting to hear if I'd passed or failed a test. She had that serious look on her face, and for a second, I wondered if I'd screwed something up. Jake, I've got another project for you, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. I picked it up and flipped through the pages, scanning the details. It was for a new client, some big company looking to upgrade their whole IT infrastructure. A huge project, way bigger than anything I'd worked on before. My stomach did that little flip it does when you're both excited and terrified at the same time. This is a lot, I said, trying to sound confident but not too cocky. Tina nodded. It is. But I think you're ready. This is going to be a big deal for the company, and I want you to lead it. Lead it. Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I'd been working hard, sure, but leading a project like this? That was next level. I won't let you down, I said, feeling the weight of what she was trusting me with. I know you won't, she replied, giving me a rare smile before getting back to business. The next few weeks were some of the most intense of my life. I was basically living at the office, working late nights and weekends to make sure everything was perfect. My team was great, but the pressure was on, and I wasn't about to let anyone down. I couldn't. Ashley was a saint during all of this. I wasn't around much, and when I was basically a zombie. She'd bring me takeout to the office when she could, sit with me for a bit while I worked, and remind me to take breaks. You're gonna burn out if you don't slow down, she'd say, concern in her eyes. But I couldn't slow down. Not yet. This project was everything to me, and I knew if I could pull it off, it'd change things. Not just for my career, but for me personally. It was like I had something to prove, not just to Tina or the company, but to myself. I needed to show that I could do this, that I could rise to the occasion. The night before the final presentation to the client, I barely slept. I kept running over everything in my head, double and triple checking the details, making sure there were no loose ends. It felt like all the stress and anxiety from the past year had built up to this moment, and I was standing at the edge of something huge. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom, my heart pounding in my chest. The clients were all there, suits and ties, serious faces. I set up my presentation, trying to calm my nerves, but it felt like my whole career was riding on this one meeting. Tina was there too, sitting at the head of the table, watching me closely. I took a deep breath, reminded myself that I'd prepared for this, and started the presentation. It wasn't perfect. I fumbled a couple of slides, stumbled over a few words, but I kept going. I answered their questions, explained the plan, and showed them exactly why this upgrade was what they needed. And when it was all over, I stood there, waiting for their reaction, my palms sweating like crazy. For what felt like an eternity, no one said anything. They just sat there, flipping through the documents, whispering to each other. My stomach was doing backflips, and I was half expecting them to tear everything apart. But then, the head of their IT department spoke up. "This looks good," he said, nodding. "We'll move forward with the plan." I couldn't believe it. I actually did it. I wanted to jump up and fist pump the air like a complete idiot, but I kept it together, nodding professionally like this was just another day at the office. But inside, I was screaming with excitement. After the meeting, Tina pulled me aside. "Great work," she said, that rare smile back on her face. "You've earned this." I don't know what hit me harder, her praise or the fact that I'd just pulled off the biggest project of my life. Either way, it felt like I'd crossed some kind of invisible finish line. All the crap I'd been through, the fights with my parents, getting kicked out, dropping out of college, working 2 jobs just to survive, it all led to this moment. That night, I walked out of the office, the weight of the past few months finally lifting off my shoulders. I didn't even care that I'd probably be back there first thing in the morning, working on the next thing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I called Ashley on my way home, my voice full of excitement. "Babe, we did it! They loved the presentation. We're moving forward with everything." She laughed, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "I knew you would. I'm so proud of you, Jake." Hearing that made it all feel even more real. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about everything I'd fought for, everything I'd sacrificed to get to this point. I wasn't the same guy who'd been kicked out of his parents' house, lost and scared. I was building something for myself, on my own terms. The future didn't seem so uncertain anymore. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And that feeling, that was worth everything. A few years after that big project at work, my life had changed in ways I never imagined. I'd gone from barely scraping by to climbing the ladder in the IT world, and eventually I made a decision that surprised even me. I started my own company. It wasn't an overnight thing, of course. I'd been working for a while, building up a solid reputation, saving up some money, and making connections. Eventually, I felt ready to take the leap. Starting my own business wasn't easy at first. There were sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and the constant fear that everything could crash and burn. But I had this feeling deep down that this was what I was meant to do. So I stuck with it, grinding day in and day out. Before long, things started to click. I started landing contracts, building a small but solid team, and the company began to take off. After a couple of years, we were pulling in more money than I ever thought possible. I wasn't just making it anymore, I was actually doing really well. I wasn't flipping burgers or guarding empty buildings. I was running my own company and watching it grow bigger every month. It felt surreal at times, like I was living in someone else's life. But it was mine. I'd built this. Around the time my company really started to take off, Ashley and I began talking about buying a house. We'd been renting for years, and it felt like the right time to find something permanent, something we could call our own. We started looking at listings, visiting open houses on weekends, and dreaming about the kind of place we wanted to settle down in. One day, I was scrolling through some real estate sites, and I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. The house where I grew up, the one my parents still lived in, was listed for sale. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't spoken to them in years, and honestly, I didn't keep up with what was going on in their lives. But seeing that house for sale, it hit me in a weird way. I clicked on the listing and checked out the details. Apparently, their landlord had decided to sell the property, and it was being listed at a price that was honestly a steal compared to other houses in the area. And then, like a light bulb going off in my head, I had this wild idea. I could buy the house. At first, it felt a little petty. I mean, who does that? Who buys their parents' house after they kick them out? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I was in a position to do it, and they didn't know I had money or that I was even considering buying a house. This could be my chance to take back some control over a situation that for years had left me feeling powerless. So, I called up my real estate agent and put in an offer. I didn't even hesitate. The price was right, and I had more than enough money to make it happen without breaking a sweat. A few weeks later, the deal closed, and just like that, I was the owner of the house where I spent my childhood. It was mine. Here's where things get interesting. The day after the sale went through, I got a call from the property manager who had been handling the place. The tenants are asking to meet the new owner, he said. They want to discuss the rent and some issues they've been having. I smiled to myself. This was going to be good. I didn't tell them anything, of course. I just told the property manager to schedule the meeting. The plan was already forming in my head. When the day came, I showed up at the house, parked my car out front, and knocked on the door like I was just some regular landlord. My dad answered the door. He looked surprised, but I could tell he didn't recognize me right away. It had been years since we'd seen each other, and I guess I didn't look like the same guy who left their house with a duffel bag and no real plan. "We're here to meet the landlord," he said, looking confused. "That's me," I replied, stepping inside like I owned the place, which of course I did. He blinked, clearly not expecting this. "Wait, what? You're the landlord?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to laugh. "I bought the place." At that moment, my mom walked in from the living room. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. "Jake!" she gasped. "What are you doing here?" I just smiled and leaned against the wall. "Well, I'm your landlord now." The look on their faces was priceless. They were completely speechless, just standing there in shock. I could tell they were trying to process the fact that the kid they kicked out all those years ago was now the owner of their house. It felt like some kind of weird justice, but I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to handle business. "So," I said, breaking the awkward silence, "about the rent." They both stared at me, clearly not ready for what was coming. "I'm tripling it," I said, straight-faced. My dad's jaw dropped. "Tripling it? You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious," I replied. "You see, property values have gone up, and I've got to make sure I'm getting a fair return on my investment. So yeah, the rent is going up. A lot." My mom tried to reason with me, her voice shaky. "Jake, we can't afford that. You know we can't." I shrugged. "That's not really my problem. You can either pay the new rent or find somewhere else to live. It's up to you." It was harsh, I know, but I wasn't going to back down. They'd made their choice years ago when they threw me out, and now it was my turn to set the terms. They stood there, stunned, probably realizing that they didn't have much of a choice. With their credit shot and no real options, they were stuck. After a few minutes of awkward back and forth, I told them I'd give them some time to figure things out and walked out the door. As I got into my car and drove away, I couldn't help but feel a weird mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied, maybe even a little vindicated, but another part of me felt empty. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd proven that I wasn't the failure they thought I'd be, that I'd made something of myself despite everything they'd put me through. But as I drove away from that house, I realized that no amount of rent hikes or property ownership could fix the damage that had been done. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about letting go. Still, I wasn't backing down on the rent. Story 6. This story is titled, My Sister Got Me Excluded from Christmas Because I'm Just a Plumber. So I cut off her law school money that I was paying for, now she is begging. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Okay, so I've been sitting on this story for a while, trying to figure out how to even start explaining this mess. I guess I should introduce myself first. I'm 32, single, and I run my own plumbing business. Yeah, I know, not the most glamorous job according to some people, like my family. But honestly, I make really good money, and I actually love what I do. There's something satisfying about solving problems and helping people, even if it means dealing with their literal shit sometimes, lol. My sister Amanda is 26 and currently in law school, which I've been paying for. Yeah, you read that right. I've been covering her full tuition since she started. Her boyfriend was this hotshot doctor at the local hospital. Real piece of work, that guy, but we'll get to him later. So here's where everything went sideways. About a week before Christmas, I get this call from my mom. Now, you gotta understand something about my mom. She never calls just to chat or check on me. It's always because she wants something or there's some kind of family situation that needs handling, usually involving money tbh. But this call was different. She starts off with this weird, hesitant voice, like when someone's about to tell you your dog died or something. Then she drops this bomb on me. I'm not invited to Christmas this year, just like that. No warning, no discussion, nothing. At first, I thought I must have heard her wrong. Like, maybe she was saying they were changing the date or something? But nope. She goes on with this whole speech about how it might be best if you sit this one out, and we want to keep things comfortable for everyone. I'm sitting there thinking, what the actual fuck? Because this is coming out of nowhere. We've always done Christmas together, even during those years when I was working crazy hours getting my business off the ground. Sure, my family's always been kind of weird about my job. They love the money I make from it, but God forbid they actually tell anyone what their brother does for a living. So I press her on it, right? Like, what's the real reason? That's when she starts hemming and hawing, talking in circles about professional appearances and considering everyone's comfort. But she wouldn't give me a straight answer. It wasn't until later that day that I found out the real reason from my cousin Sarah. She'd overheard Amanda talking about it with our mom earlier that week. Apparently, my dear sister had told our parents that having me at Christmas would make things uncomfortable because I didn't fit in well with her and her boyfriend's professional status. Let that sink in for a minute. My own sister, who I've been putting through fucking law school, was embarrassed to have me at Christmas because I'm just a plumber. She was worried what her fancy doctor boyfriend would think about having to sit at the same table as someone who works with their hands for a living. The more I thought about it, the more things started clicking into place. Like how Amanda never invited me to any of her law school events, even though I was the one paying for her to be there. Or how she'd always change the subject when her friends asked what her brother did for work. Or how she'd never introduced me to her boyfriend, even though they'd been dating for almost a year. And you know what the worst part was? My parents agreed with her. They actually thought it was reasonable to exclude their own son from Christmas because his job might make their precious daughter's boyfriend uncomfortable. The same son who's been helping support the family since he was 18. The same son who started his own successful business from scratch. The same son who's been paying their golden child's law school tuition without complaining. My mom tried to sugarcoat it with stuff like, well, honey, you know how these professional circles are. And maybe next year when you've developed your career more. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? I own my own business. I have employees. I make six figures doing honest work. But apparently that's not developed enough because I don't wear a suit and tie to work. I spent that whole day just sitting with this information, getting more and more pissed off. Not even the hot, angry kind of pissed off. More like this cold, calm realization that my family, especially my sister, had been using me while being ashamed of me this whole time. That's when I decided enough was enough. If I was too embarrassing to have at Christmas dinner, then my money should be too embarrassing to pay for law school. I mean, what kind of message would it send to my sister's fancy boyfriend if he found out her law degree was being funded by Gasp a plumber? But hold up, this is just the beginning. The real shit show started when I decided to do something about it. And let me tell you, karma's a bitch, especially when it comes with a side of student loan debt. So after finding out I was banned from Christmas because my blue-collar job might offend my sister's boyfriend's delicate sensibilities, I was in this weird headspace. You know that feeling when you're so angry that you actually loop back around to being weirdly calm? That's where I was at. I spent that whole night going through old text messages and conversations with Amanda, and holy shit, guys, the signs were everywhere. I was just too blind, or maybe too stupid, to see them. Like, there was this time last spring when she was having a graduation party for finishing her first year of law school. I'd literally paid for that entire year, but somehow I didn't get an invite. When I asked her about it, she fed me some BS about it being just a small thing with her study group. Found out later from Facebook, it was actually a pretty big party at some fancy restaurant downtown. Then there was the time she needed a new laptop for school. She asked me to just transfer the money to her account instead of coming with her to pick it out, even though I actually know a lot about computers. Kind of need to these days, even in plumbing. We use tablets and special software for job quotes and scheduling. She said it was because she was too busy to go shopping together, but now I'm pretty sure she just didn't want to be seen with her plumber brother at the Apple store. Looking back, it's kind of fucking hilarious in a sad way. Like, every time she needed money, which was a lot, she had no problem texting her embarrassing blue-collar brother. But when it came to actually acknowledging my existence in her fancy new life, radio silence. I decided to do some digging. Perks of having a cousin who's still in the family group chat LOL. Turns out Amanda had been planning this Christmas exclusion for weeks. She told our parents that her boyfriend Craig, yes, of course his name is Craig, came from this super prestigious family, and she was worried about making a good impression. Apparently, having a plumber brother might damage her professional prospects, or some elitist bullshit like that. Want to know the real kicker? My cousin Sarah, bless her messy, drama-loving heart, sent me screenshots of Amanda's messages in the family chat. She'd actually written, and I'm quoting this shit directly, "I just don't want Craig to think our family isn't, educated. It could affect how his family sees me, and they have so many connections in the legal world." Educated. Fucking educated. I wanted to reply and remind her that the reason she's getting educated is because her uneducated plumber brother is paying $43,000 a year in tuition. But I held back. I was starting to form a plan, and sometimes you gotta play the long game. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about Christmas. This was about years of my family, especially Amanda, treating me like their dirty little secret. They were happy to take my dirty plumber money, but God forbid they actually acknowledge how I earned it. Here's a fun fact about plumbing that most people don't know. We actually have to study a lot, like years of apprenticeship, licensing exams, continuing education to keep up with new regulations and technology. I've probably spent more hours studying water systems and building codes than Amanda has spent studying tort law. But because I work with my hands, they act like I'm some kind of idiot who couldn't hack it in the real professional world. The truth is, I chose plumbing because I'm good at it, and I saw an opportunity. Started working as an apprentice right out of high school, learned everything I could, got my licenses, and eventually started my own business. Now I have 3 trucks on the road, 2 full-time employees, and more work than I can handle. But to my family, I'm still just the embarrassing brother who fixes toilets. I kept thinking about all those times I stayed late at jobs or took on extra work to make sure I could cover Amanda's tuition payments. All those times I skipped buying new things for myself or putting more into my retirement account because family comes first. Meanwhile, she was actively trying to hide my existence from her new boyfriend and his family. That's when my cousin dropped another bomb on me. Apparently, Craig's family wasn't even that stuck up about this kind of thing. His own uncle was a successful contractor who built their family home. Amanda had just assumed they'd look down on me because I guess that's just how she sees me. I sat with all this information for a couple days, watching the family group chat through Sarah. They'd removed me from it weeks ago, supposedly to avoid any awkwardness about Christmas plans. Amanda was going on and on about how excited she was to host Craig for Christmas dinner, how his family had connections at all these big law firms in the city, how this could be her chance to secure a summer internship through his contacts. The whole time, not one person, not my parents, not my other relatives, stood up for me. Not one person said, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't exclude the guy who's been supporting Amanda through school." They were all just excited about the possibility of Amanda landing a fancy internship through her boyfriend's family. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. If they wanted to pretend they didn't have a plumber in the family, I'd help them make that fiction a reality, starting with Amanda's tuition payments. So after stewing over all this BS for a couple of days, I decided it was time to make my move. But here's the thing. I didn't want to just send an angry text or whatever. I wanted to do this in a way that would make it impossible for them to twist my words or make me look like the bad guy, which, BTW, is my family's favorite hobby. I waited until I knew Amanda's next tuition payment was coming up. It was due in like 2 weeks, and she always got super nervous about it around this time. Usually, she'd start dropping these subtle hints about remembering the payment date, like, oh, the school's been sending reminder emails or whatever. But this time, radio silence. Guess she thought the payment would just magically appear like it always did, even after they'd uninvited me from Christmas. Quick side note, I'd been paying these tuition bills directly to the school through their online portal. Amanda had set it up herself when she started, gave me all the login info and everything. Really convenient when she saw me as her personal ATM, right? Anyway, I logged into the portal and saw the upcoming payment, $21,500 for the spring semester. That's when it hit me just how much money I'd been throwing at her education while she was actively trying to hide my existence from her boyfriend. Like, do you know how many toilets you gotta fix to make that kind of money? Answer: a lot fucking more than most people think. So I called Amanda. Not texted, called. Because I wanted to hear her voice when I dropped this bomb. She picked up on the third ring, sounding annoyed like I was interrupting something important. Hey, she said, in that tone that screams make it quick. I'm kind of in the middle of something. Oh, sorry, I said, trying to sound casual. Just wanted to talk about your tuition payment. It's due soon, right? The change in her voice was instant. Suddenly, she was all sweet and interested. Oh yeah, thanks for remembering. It's due on the 15th. You're still okay to cover it, right? Actually, I said, I've been thinking about what you told Mom and Dad about Christmas, about how having a plumber brother might embarrass you in front of Craig and his family. Dead silence on her end. Like, you could practically hear her brain short-circuiting as she tried to figure out how to spin this. That's not, who told you that? She finally spluttered. Does it matter? I asked. Is it true or not? More silence. Then she tried to go into damage control mode. Listen, you don't understand. Craig's family, they're really particular about these things. His father's a judge. His mother's on all these charity boards. I just thought it would be better if you pretended your brother doesn't exist, I finished for her. Because he's just a lowly plumber? That's not fair, she protested. I never said that. I need them to take me seriously if I want to have a future in law. You know how these circles work. I couldn't help but laugh. Actually, I don't know how these circles work. I'm just a plumber, remember? But you know what I do know? The exact amount I've paid for your law school so far. Want me to break it down for you? She started to say something, but I kept going. First year, $43,000. Second year, first semester, $21,500. Plus all those extra expenses, your laptop, your textbooks, that special study program you just had to have. By my math, that's about $70,000 so far. All paid for by your embarrassing plumber brother. Why are you being like this? She whined. You know how important this is for my future. Craig's family has connections at all the top firms. And having a plumber brother would ruin that? I asked. Even though that plumber brother is the only reason you're in law school in the first place? You promised to help me, she shot back. You said you'd support my dreams. That's when I dropped the bomb. Yeah, I did. When you were proud to call me your brother. But if I'm too embarrassing to have at Christmas dinner, then I guess my money should be too embarrassing to pay for your tuition. You guys. The screech that came out of her mouth, like a pterodactyl getting its tail stepped on. You can't do that, she yelled. The payment's due in 2 weeks. What am I supposed to do? I don't know, I said, feeling weirdly calm. Maybe ask Craig? I'm sure his fancy doctor salary could cover it. Or is my dirty plumber money the only kind you're willing to touch? She started crying then, like full-on dramatic sobbing. Please, she begged. I'll tell Mom and Dad I was wrong. You can come to Christmas. Just please don't do this to me. No, I said. I don't want to come to Christmas. I don't want to embarrass you in front of Craig and his family. In fact, I don't want anything to do with any of you anymore. Consider this my last payment to the family that's ashamed of me. I hung up while she was still crying and begging, blocked her number right after. Then I poured myself a drink and waited for the shitstorm I knew was coming. After that, it all started. First was my mom. She called like 5 times in a row before I finally picked up. The second I answered, she started in with the guilt trips. her specialty, BTW. She was crying about how I was destroying the family and ruining Amanda's future over a silly misunderstanding. Silly misunderstanding? I said. She literally told you she was ashamed of what I do for a living. The same job that's been paying her tuition, by the way. She didn't mean it like that, Mom insisted. You know how Amanda is, she just gets caught up in trying to impress people sometimes. She looks up to you. I almost choked on my drink. Looks up to me? She literally got me banned from Christmas because she's embarrassed by me. How the hell is that looking up to me? Then Mom tried a different approach. Think about what this will do to her relationship with Craig. His family could really help her career. Oh, now you want to talk about Craig? I cut her off. Funny how him and his family are so important, but your own son isn't even good enough to sit at the Christmas table. She started blubbering about how that's not what we meant, and how I was taking everything too personally. Classic mom move. Try to make me feel like I'm overreacting when they're the ones being awful. Then my dad called. He went straight for the angry approach. No surprise there. Started yelling about how I was being selfish and vindictive. Called me a little shit for threatening Amanda's education. Real father of the year material, right? Let me get this straight, I said to him. I'm a little shit for not wanting to pay thousands of dollars to someone who's ashamed of me? Make that make sense, Dad. We raised you better than this, he growled. Family supports family. Really? I shot back. Is that what you were doing when you agreed to exclude me from Christmas? Was that supporting family? He actually tried to defend that. Said some BS about how sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the family. Apparently, the greater good meant kissing Craig's ass in hopes he'd help Amanda's career. Here's the thing that really got me, though. Not once during any of these calls did anyone apologize for how they'd treated me. It was all about how I was wrong for standing up for myself, how I was being petty and vindictive, how I was letting my pride get in the way of family. Then came the flying monkeys. My aunt called to tell me how disappointed she was in my behavior. My uncle texted saying I needed to man up and be the bigger person. Even my cousin Sarah, the one who told me about Amanda's lies, messaged me saying maybe I was taking things too far. But you know what none of them offered? To help pay Amanda's tuition themselves. Funny how that works, right? They all had opinions about what I should do with my money, but none of them were opening their own wallets. The best part? Amanda actually went and told Craig what was happening. I guess she thought he'd offer to help with the tuition. Instead, according to Sarah, who's still keeping me in the loop, he got really quiet and started asking questions. Like, why hadn't Amanda ever mentioned she had a brother? Why hadn't she introduced them? Why was her brother paying for her law school in the first place? Apparently, this led to their first big fight. Craig couldn't understand why Amanda would hide her brother's existence just because he was a plumber. Turns out his uncle, the one who built their family home, started as a plumber before becoming a contractor. Craig had actually worked summers with him during high school. When Amanda tried to explain her reasoning, she just dug herself deeper. She started talking about professional appearances and social circles, and Craig got more and more upset. He said he couldn't believe she'd hide and disrespect her own brother, who'd been supporting her education, just because of some perceived social status bullshit. The next day, Craig told her he needed time to think about their relationship. He said her behavior showed a side of her character he wasn't comfortable with. Who knew the guy actually had some principles? Meanwhile, my parents were still blowing up my phone. Mom switched between crying and begging. Dad between yelling and threatening. Amanda kept trying to call from different numbers since I'd blocked hers. I finally just turned my phone off for a few days. You know what's crazy? In all this drama, not one person stopped to consider maybe they were the ones in the wrong. It was all about how I was ruining everything by not just shutting up and paying like a good little ATM. But I was done being their ATM. If standing up for myself made me the bad guy in their eyes, then fine. I'd be the bad guy. Better than being their doormat. After a few days, Craig came over to Amanda's apartment. She probably thought he was there to make up, but nope. He broke up with her. Said he couldn't be with someone who'd treat their own brother that way, especially someone who'd supported them so much. Said it made him question her values and what kind of person she really was. Amanda. Lost. Her. Shit. She called me crying and screaming. From yet another new number. Girls got more burner phones than a drug dealer at this point. Said I'd ruined everything. That Craig broke up with her because of me. That her life was falling apart, and it was all my fault. I just laughed and said, "No, sis. Craig broke up with you because he found out who you really are. I just stopped helping you hide it." She started threatening then. Said she'd tell everyone I'd sexually harassed her in high school, WTF. Said she'd report my business to the BBB for fraud. Said she'd make sure everyone knew what a horrible brother I was. Go ahead, I told her. Tell everyone your brother's a monster because he checks notes paid for your education while you tried to hide his existence. See how that works out for you. Then she switched back to begging. Started crying about how she couldn't afford law school without me, how she'd have to drop out, how she'd lose all her friends, how her life would be over. Guess you should have thought about that before you decided I was too embarrassing to acknowledge, I said, and hung up. So after Craig dumped her, Amanda went into what I can only describe as a full mental breakdown. Sarah told me she started showing up at our parents' house at random hours, crying about how her life was over. She'd apparently told all her law school friends that her boyfriend was going to help her with tuition, so when he dumped her instead, she was completely screwed. The deadline for the tuition payment was getting closer, and she still hadn't figured out what to do. She tried applying for emergency loans, but guess what? Those take time to process, and she'd left it way too late. Plus, she'd need a cosigner, and our parents' credit is garbage. Wonder why when they keep trying to live beyond their means. Then she tried something that honestly shocked even me. She showed up at my business. Like, physically came to where I work to make a scene. I was in the middle of talking to one of my employees about a big commercial job we'd just landed when Sarah texted me. 911. Amanda just posted on FB that she's heading to your shop to make you face what you're doing to her. She seems unhinged. I barely had time to warn my guys before she came bursting through the door like a hurricane in designer clothes. Hair all messy, makeup running, full crazy ex-girlfriend energy, except she was my sister. How dare you do this to me? She screamed in front of my whole staff and like 3 customers. I'm your sister. You're supposed to take care of me. I tried to get her to go outside or at least lower her voice, but nope. She was determined to make a scene. You're ruining my life, she kept screaming. All because your precious feelings got hurt. You're so selfish. One of my customers, this sweet old lady who's been with us for years, actually spoke up. Young lady, she said, is this the brother who's been paying for your education? Amanda spun around like she'd been slapped. That's none of your business. Well, the old lady continued, you just made it everyone's business by bursting in here screaming. And from what I'm hearing, you got your brother excluded from Christmas because you were ashamed of his job. But you still expect him to pay for your schooling? Honey, where I come from, we call that biting the hand that feeds you. Y'all, the look on Amanda's face. She literally didn't know how to handle someone calling her out on her BS who wasn't family. But she recovered quick and switched to crying, like full-on theatrical sobbing. You don't understand. He's doing this to punish me. He's trying to ruin my future because he's jealous of my success. I couldn't help but laugh. What success, Amanda? The success of getting your boyfriend to dump you? The success of maybe having to drop out of law school? The success of making a fool of yourself in front of my employees and customers? At least I'm trying to make something of myself, she shot back. Not just playing with pipes all day like some... She actually stopped herself, probably realizing she was about to insult plumbing in front of a bunch of plumbers. My senior employee, Mike, stepped forward then. He's this big dude who's been with me since I started the business. Ma'am, he said in this dead serious voice, I think you should leave now. Your brother's playing with pipes has put food on my family's table for the past 5 years. It's paid for my kids' braces and my wife's car. And apparently it's been paying for your law school too. So maybe show a little respect. Amanda looked around and finally seemed to realize she wasn't getting the reaction she'd hoped for. Everyone was staring at her like she was crazy, which honestly, she kind of was at this point. She tried one last time. Fine. I'll tell everyone what kind of brother you really are. I'll post about this all over social media. Go ahead, I said. Make sure you include the part where you got me banned from Christmas because you were ashamed of my job, but still expected me to pay your tuition. I'm sure that'll get you lots of sympathy. She stormed out after that, but not before knocking over our sign-in clipboard and kicking a display of business cards off the counter. Real mature, sis. The old lady customer came up to me after Amanda left, patted my arm and said, you know, my late husband was a plumber. Put all 3 of our kids through college. Never once did they act ashamed of what he did for a living. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, you're doing the right thing, honey. Sometimes family needs to learn the hard way that respect is a two-way street. After that whole scene, I had to sit down with my employees and explain the situation. They were surprisingly cool about it. Mike even joked that his family's Thanksgiving drama seemed boring in comparison. So after the whole meltdown at my shop, Amanda decided to go nuclear. She started calling every single member of our extended family, telling them this sob story about how her cruel brother was trying to destroy her future out of spite. But here's the thing about family drama. Everyone loves to get involved, but nobody wants to actually help. First up was Aunt Karen. Yes, that's actually her name, and yes, she lives up to it. She called me all fired up about family responsibility and how I was being selfish. This is the same aunt who borrowed $5,000 from me 3 years ago for emergency dental work and somehow never got around to paying it back. The conversation went something like this. How could you do this to your sister? She demanded. She's trying to better herself. Funny, I said. I don't remember you offering to help pay for her law school. You still owe me for those teeth of yours, by the way. Dead silence. Then, that's different. And how dare you bring that up? Is it different? Because from where I'm standing, this whole family loves talking about helping each other until it's time to actually help. Then suddenly, everyone's real quiet. She hung up on me after that. Guess the truth hurts worse than those teeth did. Then came Uncle Steve, my dad's brother. He's this wannabe big shot who's always talking about his investment portfolio, but somehow never has money when the restaurant bill comes. He tried to lecture me about investing in family. Think of it as an investment in your sister's future, he said. When she's a successful lawyer, she'll be able to help you. I laughed so hard at that. Help me? She couldn't even stand to have me at Christmas dinner because I'm a plumber. But sure, tell me more about how she'll help me when she's successful. Well, he stuttered, maybe you could help her finish school and she could pay you back. Great idea, I said. Why don't you loan her the money then? You're always talking about your amazing investments. Here's a chance to invest in family. Suddenly, he had to go. Amazing how that keeps happening. The best part? Not one person who called to guilt trip me offered to actually help Amanda themselves. They all had opinions about what I should do with my money, but their own wallets stayed firmly shut. I am done with her, and I will keep you updated, guys, if anything happens. Final update, my sister got me excluded from Christmas. Because I'm just a plumber, so I cut off her law school money. Hey everyone, figured I should post one last update since so many people have been messaging me asking what happened. So I heard from a mutual friend that my sister decided to actually showed up at her ex-boyfriend's house, uninvited, and tried to talk to Craig's parents. Told them this whole sob story about how she was about to lose everything and needed help. Didn't mention the part about hiding me because I'm a plumber, obviously. Craig was there and told them the whole truth. His dad, the judge, apparently just looked at her and said, "Young lady, if you're trying to be a lawyer, you should know that attempting to manipulate people by telling half-truths is not a good start to your career." She left in tears, and that was that. Long story short, she had to drop out of law school. She couldn't get approved for private loans without a cosigner, and nobody in the family was willing to cosign after how everything went down. Even my parents finally stopped asking me to help when Grandma got involved and told them they should be ashamed of themselves. Amanda's now working as a paralegal at some small law firm. According to Sarah, she's telling everyone it's just temporary until she can go back to law school, but we all know that's probably not happening. As for me, business is better than ever. Actually expanded to 2 more trucks and hired 4 new guys. Still meeting up with Craig and his uncle Mike sometimes for beers. Turns out we get along great when there's no family drama involved. My parents tried to reconcile around Thanksgiving, but only because they needed help with their mortgage. I declined. Told them maybe they should ask their successful lawyer daughter for help. Oh wait, funny thing is, I actually feel better now that everything's out in the open. No more pretending, no more being the family ATM, no more walking on eggshells about my job. Just me, my successful business, and my actual friends who don't give a shit what I do for a living as long as I'm happy. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to confirm you're not crazy for standing up for yourself. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Thanks for all the awards. And to all the people DMing me about needing a plumber in my area. Sorry, trying to stay anonymous here. Edit 2. To all the people saying I ruined my sister's life. Nah, she did that herself. I just stopped funding it.